Chapter 1005. The sounds of gongs and drums filled the air, and the place was bustling with noise and excitement. There were as many guests as there were clouds in the sky, and everyone who came and went was of high status. It was a pity that the entire birthday banquet was filled with a sense of carelessness. The host and the guest looked at each other. There was a hint of coldness in their smiles. One was saying that they were dreaming, and the other was saying that they would rely on their own means. The longevity god, who had lived for 3,000 years, wore a bright red robe and sat in the main seat in the middle of the hall. He kept wiping his sweat, his face slightly pale, but the heavens pitied him. He had been preparing for his birthday since 10 years ago. He never imagined that he would encounter something so vexing. Just as the birthday god was about to fall and the birthday banquet was filled with warmth and awkwardness, Chinyu suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were blank for a brief moment before his pupils violently shrank. His thoughts stirred and he examined his entire body. During the process of condensing the god's spirit mark, if one suddenly lost consciousness and lost control of the power in one's body, just thinking about the consequences sent chills down one's spine. But today, the situation seemed to be a bit different from what he had imagined. Chinyu froze in place. In the boundless sky in the world of his divine consciousness, there was an extremely complicated god's mark made of countless runes intertwining with one another. There were also thousands of lines that looked like curtains hanging down from the god's mark. On the surface of each line, there were spots of light that flickered and flickered. It was difficult to count how many there were. It was as if the stars in the sky were strung onto these lines, and it gave off a feeling of boundless magnificence and nobility. This was his god's spirit imprint. Breakthrough? But the key was, where did this breakthrough come from? Chinyu was a little confused. Of course, he didn't know that there was a saying that had been passed down since ancient times in this world. When the divine seal is condensed, it is necessary to gather an endless river of stars and string them together to form a curtain of beads, creating a legend. That's right. From today onwards, Chinyu had begun a legendary era that belonged to him. It was just that at this time he still didn't know. What's going on? Chinyu frowned. The question was out of the blue, but the one who was asked would naturally take a seat according to the number. After a short period of silence, the stone tower's slightly dejected and helpless voice sounded in his mind. If I tell you that the connection between us has just been restored, you should believe me, right? Only the heavens knew just how excited it was just now. This was because its contract with Chinyu had suddenly vanished. In this sort of situation, the greatest possibility was that its master, Chinyu, had died and it had regained its freedom. But it was clear that Chinyu was a bastard who didn't play his cards according to common sense. Not only did he not die, but he actually made a breakthrough. No, it wasn't just a breakthrough. The god's spirit mark he had condensed wasn't very powerful, but the aura it emitted made it feel like it was being suppressed. This sort of suppression that came from a higher level was what the stone tower could not accept the most. This was because it showed that Chinyu's god spirit mark was even more noble than it. After all, it was, how was this possible? But no matter how shocked he was, this was the truth placed in front of him. Shurta couldn't help but suspect that this boy was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Could it be that he had a powerful background? Did he really have some kind of extraordinary background? Otherwise, how could he explain the current situation? As the stone tower's mind was in chaos, Chinyu rubbed his temples. Through their contract, he could confirm that the stone tower wasn't speaking nonsense. It really didn't know anything. With a thought, he severed the connection with the stone tower. The sun and moon force field circulated within his soul space, isolating him from the outside world. Besides the stone tower, Chinyu had someone more reliable to ask. It was just that he didn't know what it was doing during this period of time because it had remained in a silent state. Through their connection, he sent out a thought fluctuation. Unfortunately, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. There was no response at all. Chin Yu felt helpless. This little blue lamp fellow was becoming more and more silent. He had no idea what it was doing. Chin Yu took a deep breath and slowly stood up. In any case, what happened was a good thing for him. If he couldn't find the reason for it right now, then he would just wait and think about it later. In this world, everything had a reason. Since it had happened, there would eventually be a day when the truth would be revealed. East Zhou Jolly's training chamber was nearly completely destroyed. Chin Yu walked out from the ruins. As he looked around, his lips twitched, revealing a bit of embarrassment. He clearly remembered that outside East Zhou Jolly's training chamber, there was an incomparably exquisite garden that was filled with all sorts of rare and precious flowers. But now, the ground had nearly been completely overturned. Countless stones were piled up in a messy mess. It had been thoroughly destroyed. East Zhou Jolly had been kind enough to lend him a training chamber, but he had ended up like this. Although he knew that East Zhou Jolly would only be happy that he had broken into the divine realm, he still felt a bit uncomfortable. Before Chin Yu could think any further, a respectful voice sounded out. "May I ask if Mr. Chin has left seclusion?" Chin Yu nodded. Someone immediately stepped forwards and respectfully bowed. "Greetings, Mr. Chin." This person was unfamiliar and his aura seemed ordinary. But Chin Yu could feel the boundless strength hidden within his body. It was like a dormant volcano that could erupt at any moment. Chin Yu's eyes flashed. "I've left seclusion. Has the myriad soul Tao opened?" This was what he was most concerned about right now. The cultivator respectfully said, "Mr. Chin, there is no need to worry. The myriad soul Tao has not opened yet. The Miss is currently participating in a birthday banquet, so I ask that Mr. Chin accompany her." Chin Yu frowned. "Birthday banquet? I have no interest. After this ends, have East Zhou Jolly come see me." "Mr. Chin, please wait a moment." The person bowed. "At today's birthday banquet, there are many distinguished guests that have come for Mr. Chin. If Mr. Chin does not appear, I fear that these guests will not be willing to leave. The patriarch has already left seclusion. He and the Miss hope that Mr. Chin can show himself." These words were tactful, but it didn't take Chin Yu much effort to guess the deeper meaning behind them. It seemed that his existence had brought trouble to the East Zhou family. Thinking about it, this was also true. With Chin Yu's performance, he was destined to be fought over by all sides before the myriad soul Tao opened. In particular, now that it was confirmed that he had broken into the divine realm, Chin Yu hesitated for a moment and then nodded. "Lead the way. Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Chin." The cultivator's expression relaxed. He bowed once more and then turned to lead the way. After stepping out of this nearly destroyed garden, Chin Yu discovered that he had underestimated just how highly the East Zhou family regarded him. Right now, outside the courtyard, there were dozens of cultivators with similar temperaments and clothing as the person in front of him, disregarding everything else. Just the strength of these people alone was enough to face several original divinities if they joined forces. "Greetings, Mr. Chin." Chin Yu nodded. Although he didn't reveal anything on the surface, he was actually more curious. In the eyes of the East Zhou family, just what sort of status did he have that they valued him so highly? It seemed that this misunderstanding wasn't small at all. In the grand hall of the birthday feast, beside East Zhou Jolly, a maid leaned over and whispered several words into her ear. Her eyes brightened, revealing a trace of happiness. She immediately stood up and walked out. As the true focus of today's birthday feast, East Zhou Jolly's actions attracted everyone's attention. Just as she stepped out of the grand hall, a guest with an extraordinary status directly asked, "May I ask, where did the East Zhou family's fourth Miss go?" Everyone was well aware of each other's thoughts. It was just that they all feared each other and didn't dare to blatantly tear apart all pretense of cordiality. At this time, there was no need to hide anything. East Zhou Jolly thought to herself, "You ask me, but who am I supposed to ask?" If it weren't for you bastards, would my 3,000th birthday have turned into such dog shit? But cursing in his heart was cursing in his heart. Since everyone hadn't torn apart all pretense of cordiality, he couldn't be any less amiable. Cough! He lightly coughed and smiled. Just as he was trying to play dumb, a trusted aide walked over and whispered a few words. East Joe Jolly's complexion changed, and he waved his hand, sending the aide away. He stood up and said, "Everyone, today is my birthday feast, and I have invited an honored guest. I ask that you come with me to welcome him." As he spoke, he stood up and walked into the grand hall. As an elder of the East Joe family, although he hadn't been around for long and didn't have too much authority, he still had some status. He naturally knew of Qin Yu's background. A ruler's disciple, just this point alone, if one ignored his own potential, wasn't something that a little elder like him could compare with. The patriarch had given strict orders that no one was to leak this information. As for Qin Yu's status, he certainly didn't dare to violate it. But if his attitude was a bit better and he paid attention to him, even if it was a bit out of line, it shouldn't be a problem, right? After all, who didn't know that the opening of the Myriad Soul Dao was imminent? Qin Yu was a delicious piece of cake, and the entire hall was filled with big bad wolves that wished they could swallow him whole. Hee, I'm doing this to increase the pressure on those big bad wolves. I want them to know that wanting to steal someone from our East Joe family is nothing more than a dream. Mr. Qin has arrived. A roll call sounded out from outside the hall. This was a courteous reception given to an important guest, a sign of respect. Schwa! The hall instantly fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned to the entrance of the hall. Their eyes brightened, and they secretly admired this person. With East Joe Jolly's sudden departure, and East Joe Jolly's actions, they weren't idiots. They naturally guessed who this Mr. Qin was. They were truly worthy of being the East Joe family. Their way of doing things was truly generous. Even though they knew that they had other intentions, they still acted with such an imposing manner. This was clearly saying, I know what you're thinking. Aren't you looking for a chance to seduce Qin Yu away from our home? Fine, I'll give you that chance. I'll deliver him to you and see just how many methods you have. Of course, admiration was one thing, but they wouldn't hesitate in the slightest when it was time to act. We came to your East Joe family with such great fanfare and prepared such a thick list of gifts. Wasn't this all for this? Cough. It was unknown which cultivator cleared their throat, but there was a clear sound of clothes being adjusted in the hall. The beautiful female cultivators that had followed the procession to congratulate Qin Yu all raised their heads and puffed out their chests, doing their best to appear in their best condition. Before they came, they had been told that whoever could capture Qin Yu would be a meritorious minister to the family. Moreover, according to the news, Qin Yu was a young and handsome man. With such a perfect husband and the support of the family, why wouldn't they try to compete for him? Even if East Joe Jolly was as beautiful as a flower and excelled in all aspects, we might not be worse than you. These words were a bit lacking in confidence. But even if we were slightly worse than you, everyone had their own preferences. Perhaps I might be the type that Qin Yu liked. In this world, even men could like other men, so what else was impossible? East Joe Jolly held onto Qin Yu's arm as they entered the hall. Although her face was flushed red, she still maintained a natural and dignified demeanor. Every movement she made exuded the aura of a noble young lady. Great uncle, this is Qin Yu, one of my followers when I entered the Myriad Soul Dao. Today, I learned that you were holding a 3,000th birthday banquet, so I specially came to congratulate you. After she finished speaking, she let go and took a step to the side. She had already expressed her closeness, so she was naturally embarrassed to continue holding on to him. But, to tell the truth, the feeling of holding on to Qin Yu was quite good. Just what were you thinking? At this time, you had better be a bit more rational and not act like a love-struck fool. Qin Yu stepped forward and cupped his hands together. Qin Yu congratulates East Joe Jolly and Elder Jolly. May your life be as long as the pine and cypress trees of the southern mountains. East Zhou Jolly's face was full of wrinkles as he smiled. With his status in the outside world, he would definitely be filled with honor. It wasn't something that could be moved by some random flattery, but everything had to be said by the person. How could the words spoken by someone of Qin Yu's status be the same? This was face. In the future, when Qin Yu's name spread through the world, today's events would be enough for him to brag about for tens of thousands of years. If he ran into someone, all he had to do was say that Lord Qin Yu, the subordinate of some ruler, had once participated in his 3,000th birthday banquet, and so on. That was an absolutely easy feat to shake the hearts of these random gods. I am honored that little friend Qin Yu could come. Please take a seat. He waved his hand again and again. Men, hurry and prepare a seat for Mr. Qin. Qin Yu stood up. I thank Elder for your good intentions, but I just left seclusion today and there are some matters I must deal with, so I won't stay here any longer. I have already presented the gifts, so I bid my farewells. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Mr. Qin, please wait a moment. The person who had asked about East Zhou Jolly's whereabouts spoke up. He stood up and smiled warmly. I am... Before he could state his identity, he was interrupted. Qin Yu lightly said, I have a close friendship with East Zhou Jolly. Since I agreed to be her follower, I will not change my mind. If you have come here today for a reason that involves me, then I can only apologize. After he finished speaking, he turned and left, leaving behind everyone in the hall. All of them stared with wide eyes, feeling as if they were about to choke to death. What benefits did the East Zhou family clan offer him? Or was East Zhou Jolly really so good that you would be so hell-bent on her? You aren't even willing to listen to our conditions? Even if you really don't have any thoughts of changing your mind, wouldn't the East Zhou family clan be nervous if you come into contact with us? If they are nervous, then the conditions you obtain will be even better. To you, this is 100 advantages and no disadvantages. If we can think of all of this, then why can't you think of it? You simply turned around and left without giving them any chance at all. Aren't you an idiot? You prepared a basket full of plans, beauties, treasures, and all sorts of conditions. But Qin Yu wasn't willing to talk at all, so what could you do? East Zhou Jolly let out a long breath. She swept her eyes over the hall. A group of gorgeously dressed female cultivators revealed a look of arrogance and disdain. If translated into words, it could be said, You bunch of mediocre women think you have the qualifications to compete with me? You overestimate yourself. She stood up and bowed. Great uncle. Qin Yu called me just now to help him deal with some matters. This niece apologizes and won't stay any longer. Farewell. She turned and left. Of course. Saying that Qin Yu called her out was pure nonsense. But if he said it at this time, no one would doubt it. After all, for her, Qin Yu had given up the chance to come into contact with everyone. It could be seen just how deep his feelings were. The East Zhou family clan was truly lucky to have given birth to such a fierce girl. Fellow Taoist Fu Ru, the family has suddenly sent a message. We must return immediately. Farewell. Same here. We cannot stay any longer today. The Su family will also leave first. We bid our farewells. The cultivators in the hall all rose up. After a moment, most of them had left. Qin Yu's attitude was clear. They didn't even have a chance to approach him. If they continued to stay, they would only be able to watch the East Zhou family clan's smug face and bring disgrace upon themselves. If they wanted to win over Qin Yu, then they had to increase the threat level of East Zhou Jolly. This girl might have some harvests after entering the myriad soul Dao. This girl's life was truly good. It wasn't just the outside world that thought this. Even within the East Zhou family clan, they felt that East Zhou Jolly was extremely lucky. If others could think of this, they could also think of it. Qin Yu's firm attitude and his blocking off all contact with other influences. Was it really because the East Zhou family clan was filled with sincerity? Haha, don't joke around. If their positions were reversed, The East Zhou family clan wouldn't hesitate to pay any price in order to capture Qinyu. From the looks of it, perhaps it wouldn't be long before our East Zhou family clan would be able to climb into a relationship with a sovereign lord. This was an incredibly good thing. When a legend descended, it was bound to be accompanied by phenomena. Depending on the level of the legend, phenomena were also divided into sizes. Taking the galaxy and forming a curtain of beads to condense the great Tao Divine Seal was naturally the highest level. The reason that no phenomena appeared after Qinyu's breakthrough was because some people didn't want him to be too dazzling right now and directly transfer away the phenomena that appeared after his breakthrough. Thus, far away from the world where the East Zhou family clan was stationed, in a wild star region, a trillion rays of light suddenly erupted. They surged like great waves, giving off a nearly corporeal feeling. Guided by an invisible aura, the light constantly shrank inwards, splitting into pieces. Each piece condensed into a single point, radiant and resplendent. If someone could take in the entire starry skies, they would naturally discover that each of these billions of points of light corresponded to a star in the starry sea. It was like a bright projection of the starry sea. There were living beings in the wild star region, but their level of life was extremely low. Although they could witness the descent of this phenomenon, they still didn't know why. Originally, it should have quietly dissipated, undetected by the world. But as this bright starry sea projection descended, on a planet covered with a wild aura, an old man sat cross-legged in a beast-hide tent. He wore a luxurious robe, and he suddenly opened his eyes. One of his eyes was blind, but this caused his other eye to shine even brighter. He walked out of the tent and looked up at the starry sea that tore through the night and covered the skies. The old man's single eye became increasingly bright, and his lips trembled. True divinity, in this world another true divinity has been born. Chapter 1006. Although the Eastern Zhou family clan believed that the reason Qinyu didn't hesitate to reject the olive branches thrown at him was because of Eastern Zhou jelly. But this didn't mean that they didn't need to do anything. Such a fine son-in-law was hard to find, even if they searched for a lantern. They naturally couldn't drag down Eastern Zhou jelly because of some minor matters and drag down her position in Qinyu's heart. He couldn't afford to lose the big picture for the sake of small gains. Thus, not only could the benefits not be reduced, but they had to be even more generous, so that Qinyu could feel the full sincerity of the Eastern Zhou family towards him. If he could really marry East Zhou jelly and become Taoist companions, what was this little sacrifice worth? What Qinyu didn't know was that the Eastern Zhou clan's thoughts had already diverged, and their thoughts were all over the place. So he accepted all the gifts they sent him. The logic was obvious. No matter what, the Dongzhou clan could only be more at ease now that he had accepted the gift. As for Xiang Shui, who was responsible for organizing the list of gifts, she smiled until her eyes turned into slits. Although these things weren't for her with Qinyu's personality, if she needed them, then even if she tried to act cute, cough, cough, it probably wouldn't be of much use. But as long as he lost his moral integrity and shamelessly rolled around, it would definitely not be a problem for him to get it. Moral integrity and whatnot, it was necessary to have it when needed, but there was no pressure to throw it away when it was not needed. Thinking that the items on the list were no different from her own, Xiang Shui was even more satisfied, and her smile became even more radiant. She thought to herself that the Dongzhou clan's way of doing things was indeed worthy of their name as a giant, and they were very generous. Hurry up and stop laughing. Hurry up and wipe off your saliva. If you drown me later, people will laugh at you to death. Qinyu said with a look of disgust. Xiang Shui rolled her eyes at him and snorted. She thought, "Since you have made a lot of money, I won't argue with you. I heard that some people die in the myriad soul path's inheritance every time. It is very dangerous. You must be careful. I treat you as a thick and strong cash cow. I'm prepared to rely on you to survive in the future, so you absolutely cannot die." Qinyu rolled his eyes in anger. He thought that this woman was becoming more and more insolent lately. She simply dared to say anything to him. Flicking his sleeves, he turned around and left. "Don't worry, my life is tough. I'll be fine even if you die." Pursing her lips, Xiang Shui snorted softly and lowered her head to continue browsing the gift list. Xiang Shui snorted and then lowered her head to continue looking through the list. In this world, there was no such thing as a meat pie falling from the heavens. The Eastern Zhou family had sent such a generous gift because Qin Yu had enough value. To put it more bluntly, he was about to enter the myriad soul path. The risk he had to take was worth them paying a great price to rope him in. The greater the gift, the greater the danger that Qin Yu would soon face. Unfortunately, there was nothing she could do in this matter. She could only stare on helplessly from the side. It seemed that from the very start, she hadn't been able to help Qin Yu at all. Instead, she had become the one who needed help. The corners of Xiang Shui's mouth twitched, revealing a bitter smile. She lowered her head to look at her towering chest. "It looks like the only thing I can repay Qin Yu with is my body. But what a pity, this boy never lacks beautiful women around him. Moreover, he doesn't seem to treat me as a woman at all. I want to take the initiative to throw myself at him, but I can't find a chance to do so. No, I can't be a woman who only knows how to take advantage of others without thinking of anything in return. Humph, humph. When the Myriad Soul sect comes out, I must find a chance to push Qin Yu down and return his favor. I'll also borrow some seeds." "It's decided." Xiang Shui lifted her head and puffed out her chest. Her eyes flashed with wisdom and determination. She already had a general plan for this. It was absolutely foolproof. "Brat Qin, you can't escape this time." Qin Yu sneezed for no reason at all. He rubbed his nose, thinking that someone was plotting against him. Humph, humph, they must be courting death. He was bursting with confidence in his own strength. He didn't know how he had inexplicably condensed a god spirit mark and stepped into the divine realm, but he could clearly feel the boundless strength contained within this god spirit mark. With a thought, he could resonate with the world and mobilize infinite strength. After condensing the god spirit mark, his strength had increased by at least 10 times. Before, he could crush most divine realm cultivators, and now he was even more so. So what if he was at the peak of the divine realm? If he wanted to crush someone, he wouldn't hesitate. Even if he faced an original god cultivator, Qin Yu didn't feel any fear. This wasn't arrogance or conceit. Rather, it was a natural and instinctive form of absolute self-confidence. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes in concentration. Before he entered the Myriad Soul sect, he needed to adapt to his rising strength as much as possible. 2 days later, Qin Yu's thoughts stirred and he opened his eyes. In the next moment, East Zhou Jelly's voice resounded in his mind. "The Myriad Soul sect is about to open. Everyone, quickly come." This was a summon to his followers through a signed contract. He had finally arrived. Qin Yu stood up. He pushed open the door and saw Xiang Shui. She was casually boiling tea, a relaxed expression on her face. Perhaps it was because the charcoal fire was too hot, but she was wearing light clothes. A large portion of her white chest was exposed, so deep that one couldn't even see the bottom. Qin Yu swore that he didn't have any beastly thoughts toward Xiang Shui. But with this scene in front of him, if he didn't feel anything, could he still be called a man? That was why he took a look, then another look. And on the third look, Xiang Shui coughed lightly, calmly pulling at her clothes, covering up her exposed snow-white skin a little. Qin Yu was satisfied. He smiled, revealing several white teeth. "I'm leaving. When you're at home in the future, you should wear more clothes lest you catch a cold." As he spoke, he turned and left. Xiang Shui stomped her feet in anger. She thought that this brat was too hateful. He had already seen her, and yet he still made such sarcastic remarks. But while she was angry, she was also a bit smug. She thought that her body was still a bit tempting to him. "Humph, humph. Since that's the case, I'm not afraid you can escape from my grasp. Once you come out of the Myriad Soul sect, I'll let you know what it feels like to be squeezed dry. Fellow Taoist Qin, because he had looked at Xiang Shui with appreciation in his eyes, by the time Qin Yu arrived, everyone had already arrived. They all greeted him. At least several hundred law marks had condensed into a cage of laws, and in just a short few days, he had smoothly broken through. Just this point alone was enough for them to raise their opinion of Qin Yu by several levels. They naturally had to be on good terms with such a character. Perhaps in the future, he would be able to obtain some amazing achievements. East Zhou Jolly remained calm. She glanced at Ru Ruoxian, thinking, "You old witch, just what are you trying to do? Qin, you must have been blind to have taken a liking to this strange skill of yours." Cough. With a light cough, she drew everyone's attention. Then, with a solemn expression, she said, "Everyone, the Myriad Soul sect will soon open. Please do not leave my side. Once the transmission begins, I will sign a contract and pull everyone away with me. Remember, during this process, do not resist." Everyone nodded. A moment later, above East Zhou Jolly's head, space suddenly collapsed inwards, and a black hole appeared. Hum! Hum! An invisible strength instantly erupted, surging between the 6 people and wrapping them within. In the next moment, a powerful pulling strength arrived, directly pulling them into the black hole, where they vanished from sight. The inheritance of the Myriad Soul sect, which had existed for countless years and was said to possess the transcendent path of the great Tao, opened once more today. The white space of nothingness was vast and boundless. Time seemed to have lost all meaning here, as if nothing had changed since time immemorial. But in this world, it was impossible for anything to truly be eternal and unchanging. After all, even the supreme sovereigns had the possibility of perishing. What else couldn't happen? A spot of darkness appeared without warning and rapidly expanded outwards. In a breath of time, it grew to 1,000 feet in size, as solid as black jade. It was like the projection of the legendary divine creation of the world had opened. After the 1,000-foot black jade platform appeared, the white space of nothingness began to change. Mountains, rivers, deserts, canyons, besides having no life, this was a true world. However, it only took a few breaths of time for this world to appear from non-existent to appear. On the black jade platform, the 6 figures that were transmitted here saw all of this occur. At this time, they all had shocked expressions on their faces. The so-called miracle was nothing more than this. The Myriad Soul sect's reputation was well-deserved. Just from the scene before them, one could see just how formidable it was. This was because they were well aware that the world in front of them didn't truly exist. But they couldn't sense any flaws. Even though they knew it was an illusion, they still couldn't find any flaws. This was the most terrifying aspect. East Zhou Jolly closed her eyes, as if she were receiving some invisible message. After Qin Yu and the others gathered their thoughts, they surrounded her in the center, their eyes sharp. Before they could help East Zhou Jolly obtain the true qualifications to enter the land of inheritance, they had to ensure her safety. Otherwise, if something were to happen to her and she was implicated by the contract, they would also be eliminated and lose the chance to obtain lucky chances. Followers. Currently, they were only followers. But once the person they followed smoothly obtained the qualifications for the inheritance, they would have the chance to compete for the inheritance. Even though it was rather difficult, it was enough for countless people to disregard everything for it. After all, the difficulty of obtaining a spot to enter the Myriad Soul Path was terrifyingly high. Every single person who succeeded was either extremely lucky or they were all geniuses. Furthermore, they needed a powerful background to support them. Not everyone had the chance to obtain a spot to enter the Myriad Soul sect. Thus, becoming a follower was the only choice. If not for this, why would so many cultivators be willing to pay any price to obtain a spot to become a follower? Schwa. East Zhou Jolly opened her eyes. For the opening of the Myriad Soul sect this time, the test is to occupy 3 round platforms and obtain the qualifications for the inheritance. A spot to enter the Myriad Soul sect only represented a chance to enter. If one wanted to obtain the inheritance, they would need to undergo a strict test. Moreover, every time the Myriad Soul sect opened, the test method was different. This time, it was a choice of 3. 3 spots to enter would determine a spot for the inheritance. This meant that, including the 2 cultivators that entered, at least 12 people would need to be eliminated. If one could enter the Myriad Soul sect, then no one was willing to be eliminated. If they didn't want to be eliminated, then they could only do their best to eliminate others. Thus, no one could do anything about it. They could only rely on their own ability to go all out. East Jo Jolly clearly knew the grim situation they were facing. Her thoughts raced, and she said, "I have a suggestion." She turned around and looked at Chinyu. After a brief pause, she continued, "Chinyu will stay here and guard the round platform so that it is not occupied. I and the other 4 fellow Taoists will leave and seize the 2nd round platform." Space suddenly fell silent. Shan Lingyue and the other 3 people's eyes widened, shock in their eyes. They clearly didn't expect that East Jo Jolly would place such a high value on Chinyu. It seemed that the East Jo clan must have grasped some information they didn't know. For instance, Chinyu's true origins. Chapter 1007. Every cultivator that entered the Myriad Soul Tao had 5 followers. If they wanted to seize the other round platforms, they would have to divide into 2 groups. Chin, you would be left alone to guard while East Jo Jolly and the other 4 attacked. Based on pure probability, there was a high chance they would succeed. This was indeed the best way to deal with this situation. Of course, the premise was that Chin Yu could defend the round platform. Otherwise, if it was taken by someone else, the 6 of them would be eliminated. In this matter, East Jo Jolly's attitude was crucial. After all, before the contract was completed, she was the leader. The Myriad Soul Tao involved a great deal, and she absolutely wouldn't act recklessly. Since she did this, she must have a certain degree of confidence. Chin Yu's strength was likely far greater than what he appeared on the surface. Thus, after a brief moment of shock, Shan Lingyue and the others all looked at Chin Yu and then silently agreed. Chin Yu thought for a moment and nodded. "All right, I will defend this place with all my strength." East Jo Jolly turned and left. "Let's go." Whoosh, whoosh. 5 figures howled into the distance. This woman was decisive enough. Once she decided on her intentions, she immediately took action. Although Chin Yu had a considerable degree of confidence in his own strength, he didn't dare to be careless in the least. After all, in the endless heavens, powerhouses were as numerous as carps in a river. Who could guarantee that they could stand in an invincible position? If East Jo Jolly trusted him so much, he certainly had to do his best to live up to her trust. Chin Yu took a deep breath and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and completely released his divine sense. Even the slightest movement in the wind couldn't escape his senses. An hour later, Chin Yu opened his eyes, a trace of surprise in them. He never imagined that trouble would come knocking on his door so quickly. Moreover, there were 5 of them. It seemed that they had made the same decision as East Jo Jolly. Standing up, Chin Yu stood atop the round platform. His eyes were indifferent, but there was a cold chill in them. He slowly said, "Since you've come, show yourself." After a brief silence, space fluctuated and 5 figures appeared. They looked at Chin Yu with surprise, as if they never thought they would be discovered so quickly. It's him. Chin Yu. Damn, how could it be him? Several people shouted out. It was clear they knew of Chin Yu's existence, and they all had gloomy expressions. The news of the god-confining gorge being broken had already spread throughout the world. In addition, Chin Yu had confirmed that he would become Eastern Jo Jolly's follower and enter the Myriad Soul Path. Information related to him would naturally be collected with great emphasis. Even though no one knew where he came from, his silhouette and appearance had to be remembered to avoid unnecessary trouble. Originally, when they confirmed that there was only one person on the round platform, the 5 of them who had stealthily sneaked over were very excited. Even if the other party dared to guard the round platform alone, he must be very powerful. However, with 5 against 1, it was impossible for them to lose. But who would have thought that this person would be the incomparably powerful and unfathomable Chinyu, whose fame had spread far and wide? If he were to turn around and leave right now, he wouldn't be willing to give up on his face and whatnot. After all, leaving one person to guard the round platform while the 5 of them were attacking was an extremely risky move. The longer he delayed outside, the greater the risk he would face. Once his round platform was taken away, he would be done for. So what if he is Chinyu? No matter how strong he is, can he defeat the 5 of us working together? One of the cultivators clenched his teeth and roared out loud. They didn't care about face, but if they turned around and left to find a second round platform, who knew how much time they would have to waste? Of course, the more important reason was, as this cultivator had said. Although the rumors said Chinyu was fierce, they had no idea just how fierce he really was. If the 5 of them joined forces, they could even contend with an original divinity. So how could they not be his match? That's right, no matter how fierce he is, he has only just entered the divine realm. Let's go and steal the round platform. With loud shouts, the hesitation in the eyes of these people rapidly faded away. Instead, a fierce light surged in their eyes. Calm down. The cultivator, who had been silent from the start, spoke up. The 4 people around him immediately quieted down. It was clear he was the leader. Without a doubt, this person should be the cultivator who occupied a spot to enter. The others were only his followers. The cultivator took a step forward and cupped his hands together. I am Feng Hong, from Fengqing Boundaries, Feng family. I have no intention of making things difficult for fellow Taoist Chinyu. If you can withdraw on your own initiative today, the Feng family will surely repay you in the future. Chinyu shook his head without expression. Feng Hong wasn't willing. Fellow Taoist Chinyu, is there really no possibility? I don't wish to have a conflict with you. He had obtained secret information from his family. The Eastern Zhou family had once invited Grandmaster Zhou Bai to use the great prophecy art to determine Qin Yu's background. Although he didn't know what the result was, not long after, the Eastern Zhou family confirmed Qin Yu's spot as a follower. If that was all there was to it, it wouldn't necessarily mean anything. At most, it would indicate that there was no problem with his identity. But after that, Grandmaster Zhou Bai vanished from sight. The Eastern Zhou family announced that Grandmaster Zhou Bai had suffered some injuries and needed to recuperate for some time. This was worth pondering over. Although there was no evidence, it wasn't hard to guess that the Eastern Zhou family was deliberately hiding something. This was likely to involve Qin Yu's true origins. Of the disciples of great families, there were certainly arrogant playboys, but there were even more of them who had been carefully raised from a young age. If they could avoid provoking enemies, they would avoid them as much as possible. In particular, if they couldn't figure out their background, it was likely they would be a great trouble. It was clear that Qin Yu was such a person. Moreover, Feng Hong had another consideration. Even if he didn't care about Qin Yu's background, there was no such thing as a great reputation. Since Qin Yu was able to rush out of the God-confining gorge, how could he be easy to deal with? If they clashed with him, even if they won and seized this round platform, how could the 5 of them escape unscathed? It had to be known that in order to obtain an inheritance spot, 2 round platforms weren't enough. If there were casualties, how could they seize a 3rd round platform? Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, Feng Hong didn't want to be enemies with Qin Yu. If he could force Qin Yu to retreat on his own initiative, that would naturally be the best choice. But it was clear that although his thoughts were good, they were doomed to fail. Qin Yu lightly said, "If you don't dare to attack, then leave." Feng Hong's complexion sank. He took a deep breath and said, "If that's the case, then we will offend you. If we have offended you in any way, I ask fellow Taoist Qin Yu to be magnanimous enough to forgive us." As his words fell, He lifted a hand and pressed forwards. Attack! Bang! There was an explosive sound in the void. It was like an invisible mountain had fallen down, causing the air to become thick and viscous, like thick glue that wrapped around Chinyu. At the same time, his 4 followers erupted with their greatest strength without hesitation. Although they spoke with great momentum, as if they didn't place Chinyu in their eyes, none of them were idiots that could make it to this point. None of them dared to underestimate him. Since they attacked, they would naturally do their best to suppress Chinyu in a single move. With Feng Hong as the leader of the 5, their strength was without a doubt. If they joined forces, it could be seen just how terrifying they were. But Chinyu's expression remained calm. His eyes shined, revealing a bit of eagerness. After breaking into the divine realm, he hadn't used his full strength yet, but it should be enough to suppress the 5 people in front of him. Thinking this, Chinyu stood up and pointed a finger forward. Puff! There was a dull sound, like a sharp weapon piercing through a thick leather drum. The oppressive strength that flooded the world instantly vanished. Feng Hong's eyes widened, and he revealed a horrified expression, as if he had seen a ghost. It had to be known that the reason the Feng family was surnamed Feng wasn't because it was a bloodline inheritance. Rather, it was because a certain ancestor had reached large success in the Tao of Sealing. In order to inherit the invisible destiny of the world, they had changed their surname to Feng. Sealing arts were the most formidable methods of the Fengqing Boundaries Feng family. What Feng Hong used just now was one of the fiercest of them all, drawing the world into a cage, imprisoning a cultivator within. The more time passed, the more solid the cage became and the more tyrannical it became. But this didn't mean that the sealing art was weak at the start. On the contrary, it was still incomparably powerful. Otherwise, if someone broke free before the seal took effect, wouldn't that be a joke? With Feng Hong's current cultivation, if he attacked with all his strength, even a peak divine realm cultivator wouldn't be able to easily escape. But what did Chinyu do? He only lifted a hand and casually pointed a finger forward. During this process, Feng Hong wasn't even able to feel any fluctuations of strength, but the strength of this finger was able to tear apart the seal. It was simple and direct, as if it were nothing but rotten would this caused an icy fear to rise from the depths of his heart. Indeed, what corresponded to his reputation was his formidable strength. No, the strength that Chinyu revealed today was far more terrifying than the rumors made it out to be. He feared there was going to be trouble today. As Feng Hong's complexion became increasingly dignified, his heart shrank. Without warning, fear erupted from the depths of his heart. This is bad. With a scream in his heart, the jade ring on Feng Hong's left index finger suddenly exploded into pieces. It was like his head had been struck by a heavy hammer. His ears buzzed and his mind spun. His vision darkened and his vision darkened. Dark red blood flowed out from his mouth, nose, and ears sliding down his face. He looked distressed and distressed. After a breath of time, Feng Hong's consciousness condensed once more. He immediately revealed an expression of fear and turned to flee without hesitation. Run! He didn't know what method Chinyu had used to launch this attack on him, but without a doubt, the terror of this attack was enough to take his life. If it weren't for the ring on his hand blocking the majority of the killing power in the critical moment, he feared he would already be lying on the ground. This Chinyu was too terrifying. Feng Hong didn't know why he was so terrifying, nor was he in the mood to find out the reason. He only knew one thing. If he didn't leave now, he feared he would have no choice but to stay here today. Feng Hong's reaction was extremely fast. After sensing danger, he fled without hesitation. But unfortunately, he was too late. It wasn't just because Chinyu was strong enough, but because from the moment he arrived here, he had become a chess piece in someone else's hands. Bang, 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 bang. The 4 followers that rushed towards Chinyu were sent flying backwards, as if they had been slapped by an invisible hand. Their eyes widened in shock and disbelief. They couldn't imagine that even with the 5 of them joining forces, they still weren't Chinyu's match. It had to be known that he had just broken into the divine realm. So how could he be so strong? This was simply unreasonable, but reasoning was useless. Since they weren't Qin Yu's match, they had to find a way to escape. At this time, a change occurred. One of the followers that was sent tumbling backwards suddenly stopped in midair. In the next moment, with a loud explosion, a terrifying aura erupted from his body. With the sound of crackling bones, this person's body suddenly grew. In the blink of an eye, he surpassed 30 feet. Because his skin couldn't withstand the rapidly expanding body, his flesh, blood, and bones began to tear apart. Immediately, blood gushed out. Billowing black gas gushed out from the cracks on his body, weaving together into a mass that covered his body. Only a pair of blood-red eyes stood out from the black gas. They released endless cruelty and destruction. Qin Yu frowned. He subconsciously held his breath. As he looked at this mass of black fog, a thick killing intent appeared in his eyes. In this boundless world, there were countless evil cultivation methods. For example, the demonic path had all sorts of horrifying transformations, but they were all common. But the person in front of him was different. When facing the great Tao plunderers and feeling their aura, any cultivator would instinctively feel a sense of disgust and rejection. But at this time, what Qin Yu felt was even more intense. It wasn't just disgust, but a killing intent that gushed out from the depths of his heart. This was a kind of rejection on the level of life. It was like two different life forms that couldn't coexist. Once they met, there was no need for any reason. Only by thoroughly destroying one side would things end. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his instinctive killing intent. He swept his eyes over Feng Hong and the others. They all had shocked expressions. It was clear they didn't know what was happening in front of them. Before Qin Yu could observe them more, the complexions of Feng Hong and the others changed. They all revealed panic-stricken expressions. "Ah, damn it, what are you doing? Hurry up and stop. My strength, he is plundering my strength. Stop, you are crazy. If anything happens to me, you will die without a grave. Save me, hurry and save me." The bodies of Feng Hong and the others withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Their flesh and blood vanished, and the halos in their eyes vanished as well. Their blood essence and souls were all cleanly swallowed. After obtaining the strength of the four people, the mass of black fog wildly rose in volume. In the blink of an eye, it surpassed 1,000 feet. Suppressive gasps were accompanied by excited roars. What an intoxicating taste! Flesh and blood beings should become food for my people. This is the mission and honor of your birth. Shua! The blood-red eye in the black fog locked onto Qin Yu. It chuckled and seemed to lick its tongue. Now it is your turn. Qin Yu sucked in a deep breath. What are you? Humans are the most boring life form I have ever encountered, even though your taste is also the best. The blood-red eye in the black fog laughed. After death, everything becomes nothing. Why waste time caring about such irrelevant matters? Now, the only thing you should be doing is to howl in fear and despair. Bang! The black fog tumbled, like a river bursting through a dam. Black waves held forth, rushing straight towards Qin Yu. Chapter 1008. Qin Yu's complexion changed. His heart violently shrank and his heart began to race. He didn't know how terrifying the black mist in front of him was, but the warning signs in his heart were definitely there. He lifted a hand and pressed forward. 5-colored divine light erupted, weaving together to form a 5-colored vortex. Rumble, rumble. As it rapidly spun, a terrifying tearing strength was released, directly pulling in the surging black wave. With a crackling sound, the 5-colored vortex began to corrode and break apart at a speed visible to the naked eye. After Qin Yu broke into the divine realm, the incomparably powerful 5-element samsara supernatural ability that possessed the power to suppress and defend was incomparable to how it was in the past. He couldn't resist it at all. This wasn't an absolute suppression of strength. Rather, it was an absolute suppression of attributes, as if this black fog itself was the nemesis of all supernatural abilities. Jage, it's useless. With your strength, it is impossible for you to contend with me. Just obediently wait for your death. Strange laughter echoed out from the black fog, revealing an irrepressible burning desire and greed. Qin, you could clearly sense that those blood-red eyes were locked onto him, as if they wished to swallow him whole. This fellow seemed to be confident in himself, as if he were already food placed on a plate. In truth, this wasn't a good feeling at all. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes, a cold light flashing in their depths. He took a step forwards, and space suddenly shattered. Beneath the bombardment of a terrifying strength, ripples spread outwards, forming a tide of destruction that temporarily isolated the black fog from the 5-element samsara. But at this time, Qin Yu's complexion changed. Without hesitation, he lifted a hand and pointed a finger between his eyebrows. Where his fingertip fell, there was a loud, cracking sound. But there was no blood. Instead, there was a mass of black smoke. This black smoke seemed to have a mind of its own. After sensing that it had been discovered, it rapidly stretched and turned into a large worm that drilled deeper into the flesh between Qin Yu's eyebrows. Humph! With a cold cough, Qin Yu pinched the tip of the black smoke. Wherever his fingertips touched, he felt a burning pain. Come out! With a loud roar, he pulled backwards, and the black smoke was pulled out from his body. With a shrill cry, it turned into a ghostly face that rushed at him. Hum! Within Qin Yu's soul space, the sun and moon force field suddenly stirred up a fluctuation that swept outwards. The ghostly face formed from black smoke that rushed towards Qin Yu, shattered and vanished without a trace. On the other side, a groan came out from the black mist. It was obvious that the destruction of the ghost face mask had affected him. Those blood-red eyes locked onto Qin Yu. Although they still revealed naked greed and bloodthirstiness, there was now a bit more caution. If Qin Yu could destroy his divine avatar, that proved that there was something on Qin Yu's body that could threaten him. But that's even better. The human cultivators, they killed the stronger the warrior, the more rewards he would receive from the abyss. An abyssal species. In Qin Yu's mind, the little blue lamp's consciousness suddenly fluctuated. In the next moment, somewhere in his soul space collapsed inwards, and the phantom of a great sun appeared. It had been a long time since the little blue lamp's projection had descended. During this long period of time, it had remained silent. Today, Qin Yu could feel the disgust and dread it revealed, as well as a deep sense of vigilance. This was the first time Qin Yu had felt such emotions from it, as if the abyssal species that the little blue lamp spoke of could pose a threat to it. Thinking of this, Qin Yu's heart chilled. Looking at the entire world, he was absolutely one of the people that understood the existence of the little blue lamp the most. He naturally knew that it could turn the rotten into the miraculous, and that it was inconceivable to the extreme. If even the little blue lamp had such misgivings, then this abyssal species must be extremely terrifying. As if sensing Qin Yu's thoughts, the little blue lamp's consciousness fluctuated once more. It isn't just terrifying, but extremely terrifying. It seems that after that incident in the past, there were some changes in the Great Desolate. There are actually abyssal species that escaped. Don't ask too much. There are some things I cannot tell you right now, but there is one thing you must remember. No matter when or where, as long as you encounter an abyssal species, do not hesitate to kill it at all costs. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. I don't need to ask, but killing this thing isn't easy. At the very least, my strength is restrained by it. The little blue lamp said, the abyssal demonic energy of an abyssal species naturally restrains the strength of all flesh and blood beings. But you are no longer at the level of an ordinary flesh and blood being, so killing it isn't difficult at all. The fluctuations of the sun and moon force field can temporarily protect you from the damage of the abyssal demonic energy. The strength of the jade embryo egg is condensed from the great Tao of the heavens and earth. You only need a single strike to kill an abyssal species of this level. But there is one thing you must remember. You must act quickly and ensure that you kill it in a single strike. Otherwise, if this abyssal species escapes, you will soon be surrounded by the entire abyssal race. Believe me, at that time, no one will be able to protect you, not even me. Qin Yu's heart chilled. His intuition told him that there was a great secret hidden within the little blue lamp's words. But now, clearly wasn't the time to think about these things. Feeling the fading projection of the little blue lamp in his soul space, Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed these thoughts. This fellow, the little blue lamp, was definitely hiding from something. Could it be that it had some terrifying enemy to begin with? No matter what, he would kill this abyssal species first. With this thought in mind, a sharp light flashed deep in Qin Yu's eyes. Shua! He took a step forwards, brazenly rushing into the surging black fog. This scene clearly surpassed the abyssal species' expectations. After a moment of daze, it couldn't help but laugh out loud. I originally thought that I would have to waste some effort to kill you, but I never thought you would be so stupid as to come here on your own initiative to die. After entering my abyssal demonic energy, even if you have transcendent abilities, your only fate is to be rotted into a puddle of blood and your soul disintegrated. Bang! The abyssal demonic energy wildly tumbled about. It was like a rapidly wriggling digestive organ, wanting to thoroughly absorb Qin Yu. But the development of events was clearly different from what the abyssal species thought. Qin Yu didn't die from corrosion. Instead, he was like a giant fish that swam against the current of the abyssal demonic energy, straight towards its main body. Hum! Hum! Within his soul space, the rising purple moon and setting blue sun gently trembled, causing the entire sun and moon force field to shake with them. These vibrations formed waves that wrapped around Qin Yu, completely repelling all of the abyssal demonic energy that had been attracted by his flesh and blood aura. In order to kill him in a single strike, closing the distance between them was certainly the best method. At the very least, even if an accident occurred, there was still a chance to salvage the situation. Wrapped in layers of abyssal demonic energy, the abyssal species' body swelled to around 40 feet. Its flesh and blood were as hard as rock, and its eyes were blood red. It frowned and then sneered, trying to kill him at close range. Ha! The abyssal races had been corroded by abyssal demonic energy for generations. In the process of inheriting their bloodline, they had already tempered their incomparably formidable mortal bodies. In terms of bodily strength alone, even the incomparably powerful ancient race bloodline could only barely compare with the abyssal species. In the eyes of this abyssal species, wanting to kill him at close range was no different from sending itself to death. Bang! The abyssal species took the initiative to greet Qin Yu. Its mouth cracked open, revealing an icy cold grin. The closer Qin Yu approached, the richer the aura of the abyssal species became. At the same time, Qin Yu couldn't suppress the violent killing intent in his heart. This caused the blood vessels on the surface of his eyes to swell up. Because they were filled with blood, there was even a hint of madness in them. Flesh and blood life forms and abyssal species were like two completely opposite races. There was no possibility of reconciliation between the two sides. From the first day they met, it was destined that only when one side completely disappeared would the bloody slaughter between the races come to an end. The figure of the abyssal species appeared in front of Qin Yu. It strode forwards, the surrounding abyssal demonic energy tumbling around it as it moved, its momentum dreadful. Jajage, human cultivator, since you seek death on your own initiative, then let me help you. Bang! The abyssal species violently exploded. It instantly vanished from sight, fusing into one with the surrounding abyssal demonic energy. The abyssal demonic energy, was it? It was the abyssal demonic energy. This was an ability unique to abyssal species. It could hide itself and give its opponent an invisible fatal strike. Chapter 1009. Qin Yu's complexion changed, anger in his eyes. He didn't expect to encounter such a situation. At this time, there was a diabolical laugh in his ears. A billowing wave of abyssal demon energy swept towards him. At the same time, Qin Yu turned around. Without hesitation, he lifted a hand and slammed it down behind him. His finger was like lightning, decisive and decisive, without the least bit of hesitation. Where his fingertip fell, the abyssal demon energy froze, as if it had been frozen by a terrifyingly low temperature. The abyssal creature that had vanished from sight slowly reappeared. Now, one could clearly see that Qin Yu's finger had fallen between the creature's eyebrows. The fingertip tore through the creature's flesh and blood, and a section had sunken. You are actually... The abyssal creature's eyes widened, filled with shock and despair. It could already feel that its life force had been severed. No, I cannot die like this. I have to send back information about him. Like the final radiance of a setting sun, the abyssal creature's body suddenly ignited with flames. These flames were the same as the abyssal demon energy. They were pure black. Qin Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Give up. I will not give you any chance. The finger that had sunk into the creature's eyebrows suddenly pressed down. His entire finger pierced into the creature's head. Without needing to activate it, the strength of the jade embryo egg erupted on its own. It swept through every inch of the abyssal creature's body like a hurricane, crushing its flesh and blood and extinguishing its life force. On the abyssal creature's body, the black flames that had just appeared were quickly extinguished. In the next moment, its entire body turned to ash and dissipated. The billowing abyssal demon energy quickly dissipated, as if everything that had just happened had been an illusion that had never appeared. They had won the first battle. Eastern Joe Jolly revealed a faint smile. With the combined strength of the 5 of them, they hadn't paid too great a price to seize a round platform. If they seized another one, they could smoothly obtain an inheritance spot and truly have the qualifications to obtain the unsurpassed good fortune of the myriad soul Tao. Fellow Taoists, we will immediately rest. Once we've recovered, I will guard this round platform, and you can continue to seize the 3rd one. In order to welcome the opening of the myriad soul Tao, the Eastern Zhou family had made ample preparations. Eastern Zhou Jolly had an incomparably powerful trump card in her hands. It was a set of formation that he had spent a lot of money to buy. Its defensive power was so strong that even an original God Realm cultivator couldn't break it in a short time. Once it was activated, it would be enough to protect the round platform for a certain period of time. As for the value of the array disc itself, as long as he could obtain a place in the inheritance, not to mention a mere set of array discs, even if it was 10 or 100 sets, so what? Everything progressed much more smoothly than expected. But East Joe Jilly was well aware that this was all because of Qin Yu's existence. If it wasn't for him guarding it alone, they wouldn't have been able to send 5 people to seize the other round platforms. Xia Chun, Wan Ruoxian, and Taoist Nun Taiping all had smiles on their faces. They were only 1 round platform away from completing the contract, and then they would be able to fight for their own good fortune. Over the countless years, there were many who entered the myriad soul path as followers. In the end, there were many who gained something. They might still have a chance. As Shang Lingyue smiled, there was a deeply hidden trace of relaxation in the depths of his eyes. Luckily, they had already smoothly seized the 2nd round platform. Even if Qin Yu was killed, they could still stay here and not fail. Looking at the time, they should have already made their move. As for whether or not Qin Yu could resist, that was the lord with a pure bloodline. Not only was he incomparably strong, but he was also the natural nemesis of all flesh and blood beings. Unless one's strength reached the limit and they were existences that transcended the world, only then would they be able to contend with the Lord. Although Qin Yu was strong, he was still far from that boundary, so it was impossible for him to accomplish this. Soon, Qin Yu would be killed by the Lord, and because of this he would obtain a reward. He hoped that he could obtain several drops of god blood this time and further change his bloodline. At that time, he would be able to become even more powerful. Shang Lingyue sat down with everyone, but he didn't cultivate. Instead, he suppressed the excitement in his heart and waited for the signal that Qin Yu had been killed. Moments later, there was a stuffy cough on the round platform. East Zhou Jili and the others opened their eyes to see Shang Lingyue spit out a mouthful of blood. His face paled and his body shivered. His eyes were wide open, filled with shock and disbelief. "Brother Shang, how are you?" East Zhou Jili's complexion changed. She hurriedly stood up, a look of concern on her face. If one were to say that there was a deep friendship between her and Shang Lingyue, that naturally didn't exist. But even if you really want to spit out blood, at least hold on until you help me seize the third stone platform. I still need you now. Although her words were a bit cold, it was clear that this was the truth. It had to be said that this Shang Lingyue was indeed a character. His mind was shaken by this sudden change, but he soon suppressed his emotions. He looked up and squeezed out a smile on his pale face. "It's nothing. Just now, when I was fighting with someone, I gained some insights. I wanted to try and see if I could make a breakthrough, but I didn't expect something to go wrong. Everyone, don't worry, I'm fine. I will recover soon." It was clear that he understood everyone's concern for him and where the main point was. A fairy's eyes flashed. "Fellow Taoist Shang, I cultivate a secret technique that can speed up the recovery of injuries. Perhaps it can help you." She faintly smiled, filled with charm. "After all, you and I are bound together. I also hope that you can recover as soon as possible." Shang Lingyue shook his head. "Thank you for Fairy Wan's good intentions, but the peach source art that I cultivate cannot be taught to outsiders. It would be difficult for others to investigate it." He took a deep breath. "Everyone, rest assured that I will soon stabilize my injuries and won't drag everyone down." Seeing his firm attitude and calm tone, as if there really weren't any problems, Eastern Zhou Jili nodded. "Then, Brother Shang, hurry up and cultivate. If there is anything you need help with, please feel free to ask." Shang Lingyue closed his eyes. He could no longer conceal the tumultuous waves in his heart. They turned into billowing waves that tumbled in his mind. That Lord had died. How was this possible? It had to be known that he was an existence that descended from the abyss and possessed a pure bloodline. If it weren't for the fact that he was worried that killing too much would arouse the suspicions of the outside world, he would have been able to kill off all the cultivators of the myriad soul path by himself. After all, the abyssal species had an innate ability to restrain flesh and blood beings. Shang Lingyue was well aware of just how terrifying this was. However, even under such circumstances, his life mark had been completely extinguished. There was absolutely no mistake about this. Was it Qin Yu who killed him? That was impossible. No matter how deep his background was, it was impossible for him to accomplish this. For flesh and blood beings to kill that Lord, they needed a strength that surpassed the limits of the world. It was impossible for such an existence to descend into the myriad soul path. Otherwise, after so many years, it was impossible for the actions of the abyss to remain undetected. Damn it, just what went wrong. Shang Lingyue's heart trembled. He couldn't find the possibility that that Lord had been killed. But there was one thing that was beyond doubt. If a pure blood Lord perished, as the information provider, he would inevitably be implicated. Just thinking about it made him feel as if he had fallen into an icy lake. What should I do? Damn it! How could things turn out like this? I can't panic. I have to think of a way to remedy this situation. At the very least, I have to find out who killed that Lord. If I can kill him, perhaps I can make up for my mistakes. As Shang Lingyue was panicking, an icy cold aura suddenly arrived within his body. Shua! Without any strength to resist, Shang Lingyue's consciousness was instantly pulled into his mind world. The skies were pitch black. Strong winds howled, and endless demonic energy tumbled about. One could faintly make out a terrifying, mountain-like figure. He stood between the heavens and earth like a demon god from the legends. His bloodthirsty eyes landed on Shang Lingyue. Obtain enough power and become a vessel for me to descend. This is your only chance to atone for your sins. For hours later, Shang Lingyue opened his eyes. Although his complexion was still pale, his aura had stabilized. He stood up and said, "I apologize for making everyone wait for so long. My condition is fine, and I can leave at any time." Amazement flashed in Eastern Zhou Jelly's eyes. This person was truly worthy of being a disciple from the Peach Blossom Spring. His methods were extraordinary. Even though Shang Lingyue appeared to be very calm earlier, Dongzhou Jili could still roughly sense the severity of his injuries. In such a short period of time, he had recovered. If she didn't see this with her own eyes, she would have found it hard to believe. But to her, this was clearly good news. Shang Lingyue had recovered from his injuries. If the four of them joined forces, their chances of seizing the third round platform would be much higher. Fellow Daoist Shang is truly skilled. It looks like I was meddlesome before. Wan Ruoxian gently sighed. She blinked her large eyes, constantly looking around. Shang Lingyue faintly smiled. Fairy Wan's words are too serious. I will remember your good intentions in my heart. Wan Ruoxian's eyes brightened. Remember those words. The two of them glanced at each other. Their thoughts raced, and they didn't continue talking. After living for a long time, one's experience would naturally increase. Towards these things in front of them, they could basically turn a blind eye to them. At most, they would think that this Shang boy wasn't weak, but his eyesight was a bit lacking. Moreover, what sort of background did Wan Ruoxian have? If someone dared to have any thoughts about her, they were probably tired of living. Eastern Zhou Jelly furrowed her eyebrows. But in the current situation, it wasn't good for her to say anything. They didn't have the chance to do anything now. As for the future, if Shang Lingyue was smart enough, he would wake up and know when to stop. Otherwise, she wouldn't care if he sought death. Suppressing her thoughts, she swept her eyes over the four people and solemnly bowed. Everyone, I will have to trouble you all with the third round platform. If we succeed, besides the agreement in the contract, I will also have an additional congratulatory gift. Fourth Miss, rest assured. We will do our best. Fourth Miss, please wait for the good news. We will naturally do our best. Whoosh, whoosh. After bowing, the four people turned and left, howling towards the agreed location. Chapter 10:10. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows, a bit of surprise on his face. At this time between the heavens and earth, an invisible strength was slowly fusing into his body like a spring rain. After his soul and body absorbed this strength, they began to rapidly rise. This was a gift from the world itself. Qin Yu never imagined that after killing an abyssal life form, he would obtain such a harvest. What was the reason? The reason is that you killed an abyssal life form. The stone pagoda's thoughts suddenly fluctuated. This was the first time it had spoken of its own initiative since it was forced to acknowledge Qin Yu as its master. However, these words were indeed lacking in skill. Qin Yu rolled his eyes. What was the difference between this and not saying anything? However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that this stone pagoda fellow seemed to know something. With a light cough, Qin Yu said, "Be more specific." The stone pagoda didn't reveal a shocked expression because of Qin Yu's attitude. After a brief silence, it slowly said, "With your cultivation level, you don't have the qualifications to come into contact with these things. But since you have become my master, you will have to face them sooner or later. The abyss is the greatest terror of this world. Or, to be more precise, it is a terrifying existence that humanity and even the entire world of flesh and blood have yet to clearly explore. But without a doubt, it possesses the ability to destroy the entire world." Without waiting for Qin Yu to urge it, it continued to say, many, many years ago, so long ago that even I don't know the exact date, a channel suddenly appeared and countless terrifying life forms gushed out from it. They controlled some sort of demonic energy and naturally possessed the ability to restrain flesh and blood life. That was a calamity that was submerged in time. Trillions of lives were annihilated in that slaughter. You might not dare to believe it, but the world you see now is one that was born after that calamity. As for the world before, it wasn't like this at all. Of course, I cannot tell you too much right now. Otherwise, karma will be involved, and that will only be harmful to you. In short, what that channel connected to was the endless abyss, and those that rushed into the world and caused a monstrous calamity, even nearly destroying the entire world of flesh and blood life, were abyssal life forms. They are born to be the natural enemies of all flesh and blood life forms. You should have already experienced this. When facing abyssal life forms, any flesh and blood life form will instinctively want to kill and completely destroy them. This isn't just because of the natural opposition between the two existences, but because this is the world itself, an instinct that is branded into the souls of all life forms. Because what the abyss wants to destroy is not only the entire flesh and blood race, but also the world itself. Perhaps this is a bit general, but the basic concept is correct and it will allow you to better understand. So, when you kill an abyssal life form, you will obtain a gift from the heavens and the earth. This is the reward that you deserve, of yours. As the stone pagoda spoke these words, there was a slight fluctuation in its heart. This was because it was well aware of just how terrifying abyssal creatures were. With Qin Yu's cultivation, he wouldn't even be able to withstand a single blow. But of Qin Yu had in Qin, and you had SS, and he, Qin, and he, and, of it, and of, and had it, and had had. It was and although it didn't want to bear the burden, the responsibility was there. Since it had survived, it wanted to avenge its old friends. All abyssal creatures deserved to die. Qin Yu could sense that beneath the stone pagoda's calm narration, there were hidden fluctuations of emotions that were suppressed to the extreme. Although everything it said sounded inconceivable and a bit absurd, his intuition told him that these matters he hadn't yet touched upon had truly occurred in the incomparably long past. The abyss, just what exactly was it? It was actually so terrifying that it almost destroyed an entire race of flesh and blood creatures. It had to be known that the so-called flesh and blood beings encompassed nearly all existences that Qin Yu had come into contact with. For example, he had met the master of the Peach Blossom Spring once. She was so strong that Shuizheng, a warrior at the original God Realm, had to kneel and lick him. Such an existence was still so weak in the face of the abyss? If that was the case, how did the world survive? As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, he seemed to have realized something. The stone pagoda's thoughts fluctuated and it bitterly smiled. No one knows what the abyss is. Even in the ancient texts of the past, there are only some vague and ambiguous records. But right now, what you should be paying attention to isn't the origin of the abyss, but this myriad soul Tao that is connected to the abyss. This channel is suppressed and sealed. Why would a pure-blooded, abyssal creature appear here? The stone pagoda paused for a moment, its tone becoming increasingly heavy. Perhaps what my master said in the past was right. The existence of the myriad soul Tao itself has a great problem. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. The reason he appeared here wasn't for the so-called inheritance of the myriad soul Tao. What he wanted to find was the secrets of the myriad soul Tao. Now it seemed he could obtain some information from the stone pagoda. What do you know? The stone pagoda said, "My master only raised his suspicions. He didn't say much about the myriad soul Tao. After all, the person who founded this place was an existence that stood at the peak of the world. Without concrete evidence, he couldn't casually question him. Moreover, he established the myriad soul Tao with good intentions. He hoped that the lineage of flesh and blood beings could open a path to the transcendent great Tao and thoroughly resolve the threat of the abyss. But now, it seems that there really is a problem with the myriad soul Tao. What we need to do now is to find the source of this problem. Qi knew this process might be dangerous, but as a member of the human race, since you encountered this matter, you absolutely cannot withdraw. This is a mission that you should shoulder, even if you die in the end. Qi knew. He never imagined that the stone pagoda would say such righteous words. He felt that this scene was far too strange. Moreover, something didn't seem right. Why was he the only one mentioned from start to finish? I would rather die than find out the reason. What about you? After thinking for a moment, Qin Yu asked this question. The stone pagoda sighed. There are fewer and fewer people who know about what happened in the past. I have to live on and let future generations know what sort of terrifying threat our world is facing. So, no matter what, I must live on. No matter how painful and torturous it is, I must persist until the end of time, even if I have to endure endless loneliness. So what? Besides the stone pagoda, Qin, you couldn't think of anyone else who would be so thick-skinned. Haha. However, Qin Yu had no intention of exposing it. In any case, his goal was to find the true secrets of the myriad soul Tao to begin with and find a way to unravel it. No matter how dangerous the process was, this wouldn't change. If so, then what was the point of wasting his breath on it? As for truly encountering danger, they were all in the same boat. If he encountered trouble, did the stone pagoda think it could stay out of it? Don't be too naive, mm? At this time, Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. Through their contract, he could feel the fluctuations transmitted over. He had obtained the second round platform. Now he only lacked the last round platform to complete the contents of the contract. Once East Zhou Jolly obtained an inheritance spot, they would be able to move freely. This was the content of a follower's contract that he had to fulfill. Even though the East Zhou family had modified the contract to the most lenient degree, it was impossible to change this. However, just as East Zhou Jolly and the others left, he was immediately ambushed. Moreover, there was a terrifyingly strong abyssal life form hidden within. Was this really just a coincidence? Or was there some other secret behind this? Qin Yu looked up in the direction that East Zhou Jolly and the others left in. A cold light flashed in his eyes. After the current myriad soul Tao was completely opened, it could be said that it was no different from a true world. This was because, in his perception, the mountains and rivers in front of him were all real existences. After leaving East Zhou Jolly to guard the second round platform, Shang Lingyue's group of 4 were hurrying along, searching for traces of the third round platform. But their luck wasn't too good. They spent a great deal of time in this direction, but still didn't find anything. Qin Yu and East Zhou Jolly each guarded a round platform. Although they knew that these two had their own methods, it was still somewhat risky. The longer they waited, the more likely there would be problems. They were only one round platform away from completing the contract, so no one was willing to cause any problems. As they moved forwards, Shang Lingyue suddenly said, "Everyone, how about we split up and search in 2 different directions? Once we find a round platform, we can send a message through the contract." He looked at Immortal Beauty. "Fairy Maiden, are you willing to come with me?" Immortal Beauty covered her mouth and smiled. "Of course, I would be more than happy to." Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping both frowned. They swept their eyes over the two and nodded after a moment of hesitation. "That's fine too." They thought that although these two were exchanging flirtatious glances with each other, given the current situation, they shouldn't be unable to control themselves and something would happen. If they split up, their speed would be halved. Whoosh, whoosh, the 4 people split up, howling in 2 different directions. Immortal Beauty glanced at Shang Lingyue. Suddenly, she felt a bit sour on her face. She couldn't help but squeeze her thighs together. She smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Shang's injuries have really healed. If there is a need, I can lend you a hand." Shang Lingyue looked into her eyes. "I won't hide it from Fairy Maiden, but I am indeed feeling a bit unwell. How about we temporarily stop searching and help me diagnose and treat my injuries?" Immortal Beauty was startled. She was just trying to find an opportunity to tease him a bit, but she never imagined that Shang Lingyue would take advantage of the situation. Looking at his eyes, there seemed to be something wrong. Did he really want something to happen between them right now? Of course, she didn't mind. Even if they did it 100 more times, it wouldn't be a problem. But the key problem was that the current situation wasn't suitable. But it seemed that Shang Lingyue was in a hurry. Without giving her time to hesitate, he turned and flew towards the ground. Immortal Beauty bit her lips. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" She twisted her waist and followed after him. Shang Lingyue flicked his sleeves, and an invisible strength shot into the mountain, directly opening up a simple cave. He smiled at Immortal Beauty and walked in. Now she could confirm that this boy was really impatient. She secretly despised him. The so-called disciples of the Peach Blossom Spring were only SOSO. At the same time, she was also proud of her own charm. She was indeed very popular. Her face blushed red and her eyes shined with a seductive light. She walked into the cave, thinking that she would definitely urge this boy to hurry up. After all, now wasn't the time to enjoy himself. But although she thought this, she felt the sourness in her body deepen. She couldn't help but clamp her thighs together even tighter, feeling hot and humid. "Fellow Taoist Shang, where do you feel uncomfortable? Let me help you." Before she finished speaking, she was pulled into his arms. Feeling the scent of a man rushing towards her, Immortal Beauty's eyes nearly overflowed with seduction. This boy was really impatient. She closed her eyes, waiting to enjoy the pleasure. But she didn't notice that in the darkness, Shang Lingyue's hands were groping her body. His eyes were cold, filled with indifference. "Ah, you're hurting me. Shang Lingyue, what are you doing? Ah, you're crazy. Hurry and let go of me." "Save me! Who are you? What are you? Save me!" Screams of panic and despair came from the cave. Black fog roiled and churned, concealing the two figures that were stacked together. But now, she couldn't feel any ambiguous or lingering feelings at all. All she felt was an icy cold fear that pierced straight into her heart. Roar! A suppressed roar came from the cave. The tumbling black fog held back into Shang Lingyue's body. In his arms was a withered corpse that seemed to have been buried underground for countless years. It emitted a thick aura of decay. He let go and allowed the corpse to fall to the ground. He didn't even look at this beautiful woman who was still alive not too long ago. He closed his eyes, an intoxicated expression on his face. This feeling was something he hadn't experienced in a long time. But now wasn't the time for him to be immersed in it. Taking a deep breath, Shang Lingyue half knelt on the ground. He lifted a hand and pierced his forehead, allowing blood to flow out. What was strange was that the blood that flowed out didn't casually drip down. Rather, it spread across his face, drawing the outline of a blooming flower. "Incomparably respected lord, your humble servant is willing to become your vessel. I beg for your noble will to descend upon me." As he whispered to himself, there was a deep explosive sound that came from within Shang Lingyue's body. His face twisted, and he revealed a pained expression. On his twisted face, the flower drawn by blood had now bloomed, releasing an incomparably demonic aura. "Ah!" As he cried out in pain, Shang Lingyue's pupils rapidly dilated. Finally, darkness invaded his eyes. After a moment, his trembling body slowly stopped. He straightened his body, and the darkness in his eyes faded away, returning to normal. However, his pupils had become exceptionally dark, as if they were connected to a terrifying bottomless abyss. Sweeping his eyes over the corpse on the ground, Shang Lingyue's figure flickered, and he left the cave. He looked up. His gaze seemed to cross through the barriers of space and fall on some existence in the distance. Indifferent and icy cold eyes gradually revealed respect. He lowered his head and knelt to the ground, respectfully saying, "My lord, I've come." Chapter 10:11. Shang Lingyue knelt on the ground. After a long time he stood up. His deep and dark eyes revealed a thoughtful look. After searching through his memories, he already knew who it was that killed the person with the abyssal bloodline. But Wu Gang wasn't some nameless nobody. If Qin Yu could kill him, then he must have some cards in his hand. Of course, cards were cards, and he didn't fear them. He also had absolute confidence he could kill this human cultivator. But if he were to be injured during this process, he feared it would affect what he planned to do next. He couldn't lose the greater good for the greater good. Since he knew Qin Yu's identity, there was no way he could escape. It was just a matter of time. With this thought in mind, Shang Lingyue stepped forwards and held away. An hour later, through the signed follower contract, a fluctuation of information spread out. On the round platform, East Zhou Jelly opened her eyes, a look of pleasant surprise on her face. The third round platform was in her hands. Without hesitation, she stood up and galvanized the marks within her that belonged to the myriad soul Tao. Qin Yu's eyes flashed open. He looked down at the round platform beneath him that suddenly began to tremble. In the next moment, he and the round platform beneath him vanished from sight. Everything in front of him fell into darkness, and a deathly silence filled his ears. There was no sound at all, as if he were isolated from the world. Luckily, this process only lasted for a short period of time. After 4 breaths of time, light bloomed in front of Qin Yu. Squinting his eyes, he saw Dong Zhou Jelly, who was smiling from ear to ear. Her slightly flushed face was filled with surprise. Shwa, shwa. Space twisted around him, and 3 more figures appeared. When one of the 3 was chosen, and East Zhou Jelly obtained an inheritance spot, through the signed contract, they would automatically gather together. At this time, Qin Yu stiffened. His heart fiercely shrank, and fear gushed out like a tide. This feeling was an abyssal life form. Compared to the abyssal life form he killed before, the strength of the 2 sides was on a completely different level. Qin Yu took a deep breath and forced himself to remain calm. He calmly looked over. Their gazes met in midair. Shang Lingyue smiled and nodded, his face warm and genial. His pure appearance hadn't changed at all. It was him. Qin Yu nodded in return, but his heart sank deep into his chest. Before this, he had suspected that there was another reason for the sudden attack of the abyssal life form, but he never imagined that Shang Lingyue's body had already been occupied by an abyssal life form. He was the victim, or perhaps this matter itself was inextricably linked to him. Qin Yu's thoughts raced. Then he bitterly smiled. In this situation, there was no meaning in thinking about these things. What he should be thinking about was how to survive. The abyssal creature that occupied Shang Lingyue's body hadn't revealed its fierce claws yet, but its terrifying might was beyond doubt. Qin Yu's sense told him that if the 2 sides truly fought, he had no chance of winning. But now, Shang Lingyu didn't make a move. With his strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to exterminate the people present today. Moreover, he had personally killed an abyssal creature not too long ago, so there was definitely a blood feud between them. Although he didn't understand why Shang Lingyue would patiently endure, he knew that this was his only chance to survive this danger. Regardless of the reason, since you want to pretend to be harmless, I'll pretend to be confused as well. As long as you don't turn hostile and start a fight, it's fine. Where is fellow Taoist Wan Ruoxian? Eastern Zhou Jolly frowned. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping's complexions changed. In order to increase our efficiency, we split into 2 teams to search for the other round platforms. Fellow Taoist Shang and Wan Ruoxian were together. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Shang Lingyue revealed a bitter and guilty expression. Not long after we parted ways with the two fellow Taoists, I and Fairy One found a round platform. Unexpectedly, before we could inform the two of you, we were discovered by the other party. In the battle, Fairy One fell into the other side's trap and eventually died, but she also dragged two of them down with her. Because of this, I was able to kill the last enemy and obtain the third round platform. So that's how it is. Eastern Zhou Jolly revealed a moved expression. She didn't doubt Shang Lingyue's explanation. After a moment of silence, she said, "Fellow Taoist one Ruoxian died because of the myriad soul Tao. The Eastern Zhou family will surely provide generous compensation to her family and friends." Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Tai Ping slowly nodded. Although they didn't think much of Wan Ruoxian, they still felt a little sad for her. After all, in the myriad soul Tao, in a strict sense, both sides were seeking lucky chances and were people of the same race. They didn't doubt Shang Lingyue's words. One of the reasons was that both sides were equal in strength, but another reason was that Shang Lingyue had obtained the third round platform. In such a short period of time, it was impossible for too many things to have happened, of course. The most important reason was that the contract between the 3 round platforms had been completed and Wan Ruoxian had died. In this sort of situation, there was no need for them to open their eyes and investigate further. Qin Yu nodded along with everyone. A heavy expression appeared on his face. He glanced at Shang Lingyue from the corner of his eyes. If this matter had nothing to do with him, he would kill himself with a piece of tofu. However, Wan Ruoxian was nothing more than a passerby. Moreover, it was likely that she even had thoughts of seducing him so that she could pluck him. If such a woman died, then so be it. Moreover, if it weren't for her taking the initiative to approach him, she wouldn't have ended up in such a state so quickly. This was what they meant by bringing disaster upon oneself. East Zhou Jelly's eyes paused on Qin Yu for a moment. She said in a low voice, "For friends, I have obtained an inheritance spot and will soon enter the land of inheritance. From this moment on, our contract ends. Here, I wish you all a smooth journey and that you will all have a good harvest." After she finished speaking, her thoughts stirred and the binding strength of the contract between the two sides immediately vanished. Qin Yu's heart twitched. He thought, why did you move so quickly? What if Shang Lingyue didn't do anything because he was worried about the contract? If you did something like this, you might be the one to die. Although Qin Yu remained calm on the surface, he had already prepared himself to flee at any moment. But soon, he discovered that he was overthinking things. Shang Lingyue was the first to cup his hands together. "Everyone, I bid my farewells here. I hope that we will meet again in the future." He turned and left, vanishing from sight in the blink of an eye. Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping both revealed looks of joy. "East Zhou Jilly, the two of us will also bid our farewells." Whoosh, whoosh, the two of them flew off in another direction. It was as if they had reached some sort of agreement while searching for the round platform. Only Qin Yu and East Zhou Jilly were left behind. After confirming that Shang Lingyue had truly left and wasn't hiding in the shadows to ambush them, Qin Yu slowly let out a breath, a trace of doubt in his eyes. An incomparably powerful abyssal creature had actually given up a chance to take revenge for its own kind. Moreover, according to the information he obtained, flesh and blood beings were extremely delicious food to abyssal creatures. In other words, Qin Yu, East Zhou Jelly, and the others standing in front of Shang Lingyue were plates of delicious food. He was actually able to endure it. There was definitely some inside story behind this. Before Qin Yu could think any further, East Zhou Jelly hesitated for a moment. She said, "Qin Yu, what do you plan on doing next?" Qin Yu glanced at her and cupped his hands together. "I have some private matters to deal with. I wish East Zhou Jelly that you will have a great harvest in the land of inheritance. Farewell." He turned and left, without the slightest hesitation. There wasn't even the slightest bit of reluctance in his heart, okay? East Zhou Jelly inwardly mocked herself. She really had overthought things. It was likely that from the very start, Qin had chosen to follow her because of his own personal reasons. There were no other factors at all in his decision. How laughable! She had actually been influenced by the outside world and let her imagination run wild. East Zhou Jilly laughed at herself and restrained her thoughts, anticipation shining deep in her eyes. She had already obtained a spot for the inheritance. This was the most important matter right now. Compared to this, the so-called feelings of love weren't anything at all. With a thought, she galvanized the completed inheritance mark within her body. Then, East Zhou Jilly vanished from sight. Qin Yu raced forwards, increasing his speed to the maximum. After 2 hours, he carefully sensed his surroundings and didn't find anything wrong. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. No matter why Shang Lingyue hadn't attacked, this was clearly a good thing for Qin Yu. Otherwise, he might have already been chewed up and swallowed into his stomach. This wasn't because he didn't have confidence in his own strength. Rather, the stronger he was, the more he could clearly sense the disparity between them. Just because he hadn't done anything before didn't mean he wouldn't in the future. The arrival of such a terrifyingly strong, abyssal life form from the myriad soul Tao was like a sword hanging over his head, one that could cut down at any moment. Thinking of this, he subconsciously frowned. Cough! Qin Yu, I've thought about it. As the saying goes, where there's life, there's hope. As long as you leave this place and spread the news of an abyssal life form arriving in the myriad soul Tao, it will naturally draw attention and they will investigate this matter. The stone pagoda's consciousness fluctuated. So, leaving now might not be a bad choice. Haha, where was all the righteousness from before? Now that he sensed danger, he wanted to shrink his neck back. He really wasn't afraid of losing face. Towards the stone pagoda's thick skin, Qin Yu only wanted to say a single word. But entering the myriad soul Tao, this time was his only chance to find a way to rescue Ningling. He absolutely could not miss this chance. As for that abyssal life form, he would take it one step at a time, until things reached the end, who could come to a conclusion. Perhaps there would be another favorable turn. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. He looked up, determined his direction, and then held away. Hey, you need to think this through. If you continue forward, there is a chance that problems will occur. Qin Yu, how about you cancel our previous contract first? That way, I might be able to take revenge for you in the future. Speak. Don't pretend to be mute. I know you can hear me. Big brother, can I call you Big brother? This abyssal life form is extremely terrifying, and you are absolutely not its match. If you go up there, you will only be seeking death. Qin Yu's lips twitched. He thought that he had underestimated the thickness of this stone pagoda skin. With a thought, he severed his connection with the stone pagoda, completely blocking out the pagoda's sorrowful cries. Half a day later, after avoiding several groups of cultivators, Qin Yu saw 3 towering mountains that towered into the heavens. He had finally arrived. After completing the contract, if one wished to enter the land of inheritance and obtain the lucky chances of the myriad soul Tao, there were 3 paths to choose from. The first was to be like East Zhou Jolly. If one seized 3 round platforms, they would naturally obtain approval and be able to directly enter the land of inheritance. The second path was the 3 great mountains in front of him. Each mountain represented a formidable test. Cultivators that crossed the 3 great mountains could also obtain the qualifications to enter the land of inheritance. As for the third path, Qin Yu's complexion changed. He came to a sudden stop, his eyes tightly staring at the 3 great mountains. Astonishing fluctuations of aura were spreading out from within the 3 mountains. They were like invisible pillars of light that smashed into the skies above. In the blink of an eye, a vortex was opened up. As it spun, it emitted loud rumbling sounds, its momentum astonishing to the extreme. But what was even more astonishing was that a flight of stairs stretched out from this vortex. It was pure white, as if it were made from pure jade, and it fell all the way to the top of the 3 mountains. A figure fluttered up and landed on the stairs. From afar, one could hear cries of alarm coming from the mouths of everyone. Qin Yu looked up with rapt attention. As this figure became clearer, his complexion changed. It was him. Now, the one who landed on the stairs was Shan Lingyue. The third path was to release one's own aura. If one could obtain the approval of the Myriad Soul Tao, then the stone steps would descend and one could directly enter the Myriad Soul Tao, just like what Shan Lingyue was doing right now. He had actually obtained the approval of the Myriad Soul Tao. As Qin Yu's heart shook, there was even more incredulity and a strange feeling in his heart. It had to be known that the goal of establishing the Myriad Soul Tao was to help humanity find a way to break through the limits of cultivation and thus end the threat of the abyss. But now, a powerful abyssal life form had actually obtained the approval of the Myriad Soul Tao and was sent into the land of inheritance in front of everyone's eyes. To put it bluntly, this was simply ridiculous. It seemed that what the stone pagoda said was true. There was a problem with the Myriad Soul Tao itself. This likely increased the risks that Qin Yu would have to bear if he continued to stay here. Qin Yu, you've finally taken this matter seriously. Let me tell you, you cannot stay in the Myriad Soul Tao any longer. You must immediately leave. Before the stone pagoda could finish speaking, Qin Yu cut off the connection between them once more. Shan Lingyue, who was stepping onto the jade stairs and walking towards the vortex, seemed to sense something and turned around to look at Qin Yu. Shan Lingyue was startled, as if he hadn't expected that they would meet again so soon. He paused for a moment and then revealed a faint smile. Qin Yu thought about what kind of reaction he should have right now. Soon, a gentle smile appeared on his face. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, as if they were reunited friends. But in truth, deep in their hearts, they wished that the other party could die right now. Of course, Qin Yu's desire was much stronger. Shan Lingyue only thought about it for a moment before giving up. In his opinion, personally killing his prey was the best result. Without a doubt, Qin Yu had already become one of the prey that he had to kill. Daring to kill a noble abyssal life form was a great crime that could not be forgiven no matter what. He turned around and walked away. Shan Lingyue's figure finally disappeared into the vortex. The stairway to the heavens also disappeared along with it. But unexpectedly, when Shan Lingyue stepped into the land of inheritance, the vortex in the sky didn't disappear. It continued to spin as if it had sensed a brewing will. At the location of the 3 mountains, the many followers gathered here all widened their eyes. After a moment of shock, their eyes brightened. Could it be that someone had obtained the recognition of the Myriad Soul Path? After passing the test of the 3 mountains, one could enter the land of inheritance. This path was placed in front of them, but there were very few people that had the qualifications to pass it. If one could directly enter the land of inheritance, that would be an irresistible temptation for anyone. Qin Yu's expression suddenly became strange, because at this moment he felt a will descend. There was no need for any explanation. He naturally understood that the vortex in the sky was waiting for him. As long as it was willing, the same jade stairway that took Shan Lingyue would descend from the vortex and send him into the land of inheritance. If he hadn't witnessed Shan Lingyue entering the vortex, Qin Yu would have accepted the call of this will without hesitation. After all, if he could step into the land of inheritance without any effort, that would naturally be the best. But with Shan Lingyue in front of him, forget it. He would rather spend more effort and pass the test of the 3 mountains. Otherwise, if he entered right after Shan Lingyue, who knew what would happen? It was best not to do anything that would bring about death. Qin, you rejected the call of this will. It clearly paused for a moment, as if it had never encountered something like this before. But it soon retreated. Above the 3 mountains, the spinning vortex quickly disappeared. Everyone who had been looking up in anticipation was secretly disappointed. It seemed that it was just that the speed at which the vortex dissipated was a bit slower. It wasn't that someone had obtained the recognition. Of course, they didn't expect that someone would obtain the recognition, but ultimately reject the call of the vortex. And this person had already quietly arrived before the test of the 3 mountains. That's right, the test of the 3 mountains was the name given to the 3 mountains. Over the countless years, almost all followers that attempted to enter the land of inheritance had come here. They were either filled with confidence or filled with awe. But no matter what they thought, those that successfully passed the test of the 3 mountains and entered the land of inheritance were extremely rare. Stop looking. Those that can directly obtain the recognition of the myriad soul path and enter the land of inheritance are absolute geniuses. They aren't people we can compare to. That person seems to be Shan Lingyue, a master from the Peach Blossom Spring. He is truly worthy of being a disciple of a holy land. He is truly fierce. Forget it. No matter how fierce others are, that's their problem. We should hurry up and think of a way to pass the test of the 3 mountains. Aya, passing the test of the 3 mountains sounds easy, but how many people can actually do it? Filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred, the crowd retracted their envious gazes and turned their attention back to the 3 mountains in front of them. The 3 mountains were arranged in a zigzag shape. They towered into the clouds and were covered with lush vegetation. Just looking at them, one could faintly feel an invisible pressure. Qin Yu looked up several times and then looked away. After thinking for a moment, he passed through the sighing crowd and walked towards the first mountain. Another one that doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. Humph, if he doesn't stay outside and adapt to the aura of the first mountain, he will at least be severely wounded. This fellow will soon escape in a sorry state. Chapter 1012. What the East Zhou family valued so highly, and what had changed East Zhou Jolly's fate was only a single spot to enter the myriad soul path. In order to obtain the inheritance, one needed to carefully select followers and pass through the myriad soul paths test before finally entering the land of inheritance. As for the 3 mountains trial, as long as one passed it, one would also be able to obtain the qualifications to enter the inheritance ground. Through a simple comparison, one could naturally tell just how high the difficulty of this trial was, and how high it would cause one to feel despair. The test of the first mountain had already begun the moment Qin Yu took his first step. To be more precise, this should be an invisible and intangible aura. It was incomparably strange and possessed an incomparably potent penetrating power. It could tear apart all defenses and finally invade a cultivator's body, causing them to lose control of their strength and causing a terrifying backlash. Qin Yu soon understood why he had heard those cultivators sneering and mocking him when he stepped onto the first mountain. As expected, the test of the 3 mountains wasn't easy to pass. Those people had stayed outside the first mountain, not daring to enter. They must have hoped that their strength could adapt to this strange aura as soon as possible. But at this time, before Qin Yu could mobilize his strength to resist the penetrating aura from the outside, within his soul space, the rising purple moon and blue sun began to tremble. The sun and moon force fields began to shake along with them. It was like a bubble wrapping around him. Although it seemed incomparably fragile, it actually possessed an unbelievable defensive power. The strange aura that flooded the entire range of the first mountain couldn't be broken through at all. It was completely isolated outside. Qin Yu moved around a little. As expected, he couldn't feel the invasion of this aura any longer. His complexion became strange. This should be considered cheating. After waiting for a while and seeing no movement, Qin Yu felt a little more at ease. It seemed that his method of cheating with his strength was allowed. If so, then everything was simple. At the very least, the first mountain beneath his feet couldn't affect him in the least. Qin Yu revealed a faint smile. He gathered his thoughts and followed the stone path beneath his feet, continuing upwards. Because he wasn't affected by the aura of the outside world, his speed was fast. He soon caught up to the cultivators who had entered the first mountain a step earlier. There was the sound of footsteps. Under a large tree on the side of the road, A cultivator who was cultivating with his eyes closed suddenly frowned. Then he opened his eyes. Someone else had caught up, and from the sound of his footsteps, it seemed to be very calm. This person should be a master. However, to his surprise, an unfamiliar face appeared in front of him. There seemed to be no information about this person in his memory. However, it didn't take long for the cultivator to stop paying attention to the man's appearance. Subconsciously, his eyes widened until they looked as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. Strolling leisurely in the courtyard, calm and unruffled, composed. A bunch of words popped up almost at the same time, making it difficult for him to breathe, as if his neck was being choked. That's right. This was Qin Yu's current posture. His steps were neither too fast nor too slow, as if he were walking down a tree-lined path. No, it wasn't as if he were, but as if he were walking down a tree-lined path. However, the most important thing was that this tree-lined path was none other than the first mountain of the myriad soul paths, 3 mountains. Every time the 10,000 soul path was opened, thousands upon thousands of followers would arrive before the 3 mountains, but only a few would be able to clear the first mountain. Even he, who was publicly recognized as a master of the younger generation, was filled with confidence before he entered. But after arriving here, his chances of smoothly passing the first mountain had become infinitesimally small. Just as his faith was shaken and he was silently healing his wounds, he saw Qin Yu walking down the first mountain in such a manner. The impact on his heart could be imagined. Qin Yu could feel the gaze of the road examiner. He nodded to him and continued walking, soon vanishing from sight. He left just like this. He was still calm. Ah, my heart, it hurts so much. We are all men here, so why are you so outstanding? As he walked forwards, Qin Yu received far too many shocks. All the climbers he surpassed looked at him as if they were witnessing a legend. But in the current situation, it wasn't the time to keep a low profile. Shang Lingyue had already entered the land of inheritance a step ahead of him. Although Qin Yu didn't want to enter with him, he couldn't fall too far behind. After all, the reason he didn't make a move right now was likely because he couldn't wait to enter the land of inheritance. If he entered earlier, it would be best if he could find out the secrets of the myriad soul Tao before Shang Lingyue finished his own matters and grasped the method to unravel them. The closer he went to the summit, the stronger the invisible, penetrating aura became. Qin Yu could clearly feel the sun-moon force field emitting deep rumbling sounds when it was impacted, similar to the undulating waves of the ocean. Compared to when he first stepped onto the first mountain, its intensity had increased by more than 10 times. It was because of this that the closer he got to the summit, the more cultivators he encountered began to decrease at an astonishing rate. When he crossed halfway up the mountain and continued towards the summit, Qin Yu didn't encounter another cultivator. Just as Qin Yu thought he had reached the front, a figure finally appeared in front of him. At first glance, he subconsciously frowned, a look of surprise on his face. Before Qin Yu could take a closer look, this figure seemed to sense something and turned around. What a beautiful pair of eyes! The woman in front of him had a thin figure, and her facial features weren't considered exquisite. But when she added on those dark and spirited eyes, she seemed to come alive. A look of undisguised surprise flashed in her eyes, as if she were surprised that someone had managed to catch up to her progress. Thinking for a moment, she said, "This fellow Taoist that seems quite fierce, I would like to make a deal with you. I wonder if you would be willing?" The voice was very ordinary. It was the simple voice of a woman, but it had a warm texture to it that made one instinctively feel a sense of closeness. But why did she call him a fellow Taoist that seemed fierce? It sounded strange, no matter how he thought about it. But right now, Qin Yu wasn't in the mood to think about these things. He couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows. After experiencing many things, he naturally knew that in this world, there was no such thing as a good impression without reason. In particular, after his cultivation had reached his current boundary and he had experienced all sorts of tempering, his heart had long since become incomparably powerful. it wouldn't be so easily touched. Sorry, I'm in a hurry. Although this woman seemed harmless, and he didn't feel any malice from her, caution was a quality that any cultivator should abide by no matter where or when. Sensing the firmness and coldness in Qin Yu's words, the woman, standing high above, was startled. She immediately reacted and coughed several times. This voice of mine is something I was born with. Teacher said that I had to cultivate it to a certain boundary before I could freely release it. I'm not trying to trick you. She seemed a bit anxious. Her face flushed red and she waved her hand. Anxiety appeared in her pitch-black eyes. It was clear that the deal that Qin Yu had rejected was extremely important to her. This was a woman that didn't know how to hide her emotions. Although there were peerless and exquisite acting skills in this world, one could still clearly feel the fluctuations of emotions from the inside out. She really didn't seem to have any malice towards him. But Qin Yu wasn't lying. He was indeed in a hurry for time, and the reason was mentioned just now. So he only glanced at her and then continued forwards without a word. He soon arrived at the woman's side. Without pausing, he walked past her and continued forwards. Wait a moment. I can give you a reward, a very, very generous reward. I'm sure you will be satisfied. Moreover, my request isn't difficult at all. With your ability, you should be able to easily accomplish it. Unfortunately, her words clearly didn't move Qin Yu's heart. His figure didn't pause at all, and he soon disappeared into the forest. Hey, that really is a precious reward. This is a treasure that I spent a great deal of effort to obtain from teacher. It can save a life in a critical moment. Why can't you take a look before you make a decision? Her voice gradually faded away. There was a bit of unwillingness and also a bit of complaint, but there weren't any other negative emotions. Just as she bit her lips, thinking that she would definitely lose this time, she heard the sound of footsteps returning. She looked up to see that Qin Yu had returned and was standing several meters away. I'm really in a hurry, so if you want to make a deal, you had best show me your greatest sincerity. What changed his mind wasn't the woman's so-called helplessness. If he really wanted to be a good person, then in this cruel world, even if he had 100 lives, it still wouldn't be enough for others to kill him. The reason he returned was because Qin Yu had heard her mention that she had a very precious treasure in her hands that could save a life in a critical moment. He didn't know why, but these words touched Qin Yu's mind, stirring up ripples in his heart. With the sun and moon force field added to his body, he transcended the world. Although his cultivation couldn't be considered transcendent, he still had some transcendent attributes. Thus, Qin Yu couldn't completely ignore the fluctuations in his mind. The woman's face lit up with joy. She hurriedly said, Don't worry, I am the fairest person in the world. As long as you can help me, I will definitely give you the treasure. As she spoke, she flipped her hand and a walnut appeared in her palm. The skin was slightly white and occasionally there were a few black spots mixed in, as if it had been dug out from a pile of rotten leaves not too long ago and hadn't been completely cleaned yet. This is this walnut. Take a look first. If you're satisfied, then I will state my conditions. As she spoke, she reached out a hand and placed it in front of Qin Yu. This caused him to reveal a look of surprise. After a brief pause, he reached out and took the walnut. This walnut looked ordinary, but the moment it fell into his hand, Qin Yu could hear the explosive roars of millions of thunderbolts exploding in his ears. His consciousness was instantly pulled into a world of thunder. Endless bolts of lightning wildly tumbled about, as if they could destroy all. His first thought was that this was bad. He had been tricked by someone. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. He had indeed been too careless. With a thought, he galvanized the sun and moon force field, and his consciousness instantly returned to his body. But to a cultivator, life and death were decided in an instant. When his consciousness was pulled into the world of thunder just now, it was more than enough for someone prepared to kill him several times over. But when he opened his eyes, he saw that the woman in front of him was still standing in the same place. Her eyes were wide, and she revealed an expression of admiration. Then she exclaimed in a similar tone, "You actually regained consciousness so quickly. How fierce!" I was stunned for a long time. Chinyu. Should this be the point of focus? However, this also allowed Chinyu to relax a little. It seemed that this woman didn't have any ill intentions towards him. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't have missed out on that opportunity just now. He looked down at the quiet walnut in his hand. As he recalled what he saw just now, his heart chilled. In a critical moment, if he could stimulate the power of thunder contained within this walnut, it would indeed have the effect of changing the situation. Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed his thoughts. He said, "I'm satisfied with this item. Tell me your conditions." The woman smiled. She lifted a hand and pointed upwards. "I want you to bring me up the mountain." Chinyu frowned. "You want to pass the 3 mountains trial." He could calmly deal with the first mountain by relying on the sun and moon force field. But he wasn't sure what the situation would be like on the second and third mountains. But it was impossible for a person's luck to be so good all the time. It was already difficult for him to rush through them alone, if he were to bring a burden along. Chinyu didn't have full confidence he could do so. The woman waved her hand again and again. No, I don't want to pass the 3 mountains trial. Otherwise, you just need to bring me to the summit of this mountain." Chinyu relaxed. If this was the case, then the difficulty would be much lower. But he didn't immediately agree. After a moment of silence, he said, "All right." "That's great." The woman cheered. She lifted a hand and took out a silk ribbon. It was pure white and flawless, like flowing moonlight. "If you hold on to it, I can go up the mountain with you." Chinyu's thoughts stirred. He reached out and took one end of the silk ribbon. He was originally worried that the existence of the sun and moon force field would be discovered. But since she had her own methods, that was for the best. "Let's go." He turned and walked away. As he tugged on the silk ribbon, he could feel an invisible pressure all around him. It was like the air had become thick and viscous, as if he had fallen into mud. Every step forwards required more strength. This was because the invisible aura that wrapped around Chinyu and tried to drill into his body had suddenly risen several times over. As he thought, the 3 mountains trial wouldn't truly have no bottom line. It could tacitly allow Chinyu to rely on his own strength to easily ascend the mountain, but it wouldn't allow such blatant cheating methods. Within his soul space, the purple moon and blue sun began to revolve at an even faster speed. With loud bangs, it was like a stone being struck against a leather drum. Although it wasn't intense, it was incomparably clear in his perception. It caused Chinyu's ears to ring and his chest to feel heavy. It was clear that the invisible aura outside had impacted the sun and moon force field. It had surpassed a certain limit and was beginning to affect his body. Luckily, the feeling of discomfort wasn't too strong. After revolving his cultivation a little, his body relaxed. Chinyu tugged on the silk ribbon. The woman behind him was like a kite being lifted up in the air, following him forwards. Looking at Chinyu's back, he paused for a moment before composing himself once more. The woman let out a breath of relief, a relaxed look on her face. Luckily, this fellow Taoist was truly strong. He was actually able to pull her along as they moved through the first mountain. Otherwise, things would have been far more troublesome. But how did he do this? Looking at his cultivation, he could only be considered average at best, but he was actually able to pull her along. Blinking her eyes, the woman quietly reached out a hand. "I'm warning you, don't even think about probing me. Otherwise, the transaction will be nullified immediately. I'll accept the walnuts, and you can think of a way to climb up the mountain yourself." The woman blushed red, revealing embarrassment that she couldn't hide. She whispered, "I'm sorry, I was just curious for a moment. I won't do it again." She actually admitted it. Chinyu secretly shook his head. He considered himself experienced and knowledgeable, but even so, he wasn't able to see through this woman. Her actions were filled with innocence and immaturity, yet she was able to climb up to this point by herself. Whatever, they were just strangers that met by chance. Once he brought her to the top of the mountain, they would be even. There might not be a day they would meet again in the future, so there was no need to think too much about it. Chapter 10:13. He arrived at the summit, although he was carrying a burden, and every step forward required a great deal of strength. This wasn't too much of a problem for Chinyu. He let out a deep breath and relaxed. After all, who knew whether or not he would be punished for helping someone climb a mountain? Luckily, that didn't happen. Releasing the ribbon, the floating woman fell to the ground. She looked back at the mountain path, her face full of joy but also a bit of fear. Luckily, she had been dragged all the way here. Otherwise, even if she could climb up by herself, she would have to shed several layers of skin. It had to be known that she was very afraid of pain. "My name is Lu Xiao. Thank you so much. What is your name?" Chinyu shook his head. "My name isn't important. I have already completed my transaction with you. The walnut is mine now. Goodbye." He turned to leave, but at this moment his complexion changed. He saw that the space around Lu Xiao suddenly trembled. An unimaginably terrifying aura surged out. It gave Chinyu the feeling of a weak and harmless little white rabbit staring at a Tyrannosaurus Rex, spewing flames from its nostrils and mouth. Of course, the description of a little white rabbit was Chinyu's own. Covered by this aura, Chinyu felt as if he had been frozen in the air. Besides his thoughts, he couldn't move at all. Indeed, there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. What sort of treasure was that walnut? How could it be so easily obtained? Now he feared trouble had arrived. It was just that, at this time, Chinyu was inexplicably shocked. He didn't notice that after Lu Xiao panicked for a moment, she revealed a bitter and helpless expression. She was like a child that had run away from home and was caught as soon as she ran out of the house. "Humph, you really have grown up. With your little cultivation, you actually dared to seal yourself and send a divine avatar into a small world. It seems that I was too lenient towards you before, allowing you to become so lawless." With an angry shout, a figure walked out from the shaking space. His body was wrapped in a faint halo of light, and his entire body was translucent. It was clear that this was an avatar or projection of some sort, but he was the source of all the terrifying aura that Chinyu had sensed. Now that he had truly appeared in front of him, he felt his thoughts turn sluggish, as if they were about to freeze. Who was this person? In terms of terrifying cultivation, the Peach Blossom Origin Master that Chinyu met not too long ago was the strongest cultivator he had ever seen. But now the feeling that this figure gave him was even more terrifying than when he was facing the Peach Blossom Origin Master. Didn't this mean that this person's cultivation was far more powerful than the Peach Blossom Origin Master's? After all, the Peach Blossom Spring was a holy land that even the Eastern Zhou clan had to treat with respect. It was even more terrifying than the Peach Blossom Spring Master. This was a level that Chinyu could no longer understand with his current experience. But there was one thing he was sure of. If this person wanted to kill him, they wouldn't even need to do anything. Perhaps just a single glance would be enough to scatter his soul. It turned out that looks could really kill. Chinyu's emotions tumbled like a raging tide. He roared at Lu Xiao in his heart. "I was just bragging that I had a teacher that transcended the heavens, but you really do have such a teacher that transcends the heavens. Even so, you're still here, acting like a weak little girl? If you want to act, then so be it. Why do you have to trick me?" The reasoning was clear. Chinyu had helped Lu Xiao climb the mountain, and she had given him a walnut as a reward. This was originally a consensual matter, but now that her teacher was here, he might not think so. For such a small matter, you want to take away such a precious treasure from my disciples' hands? You brat, you must have eaten the guts of a leopard. There was no need for anything more. As long as there was even the slightest bit of dissatisfaction, he could casually wave his hand and he would be completely finished. That's right, he would be completely finished, even if he had the little blue lamp the jade embryonic egg, and the sun and moon force field. Perhaps in terms of potential, Qin Yu's future was limitless. But something like potential wasn't worth anything until it was fully developed. The crushing pressure of absolute strength was enough to turn his entire person into ash. He wouldn't even be able to leave behind a single speck of dust. "Teacher." Lu Xiao weakly opened her mouth, a pitiful expression on her face. But she was immediately interrupted. It was clear that this person was truly angry. "Don't call me teacher. Just hearing that word makes my head hurt." Beneath the halo of light, the phantom was blurry, and it was impossible to make out its true appearance. One could only judge that it was a tall and sturdy man. His eyes turned and fell onto Qin Yu. Or, to be more precise, his eyes fell onto the walnut in his hand. At this moment, Qin Yu's thoughts were completely frozen. He was like a fish placed on a table, waiting for someone to cut him down with a knife. Originally, things should have progressed exactly as Qin Yu had expected. He had unhesitatingly cultivated a dozen or so walnuts, and now one of them had been taken by someone else. If it were anyone else, they would be angry. In his opinion, his incomparably pure female disciple had clearly been deceived. Otherwise, why would she hand over the walnut? To dare deceive his disciple, that was simply eating a dragon's gall. No, even if he had eaten a dragon's gall, he still wouldn't dare to do something like this. In the moment of life or death, as these thoughts raced through his mind, the phantom suddenly gasped. He lifted a hand and touched Qin Yu. Soon, as if he had been electrocuted, he drew back his hand. His eyes widened, revealing a strange expression. As for these things, Qin Yu, whose thoughts were frozen, naturally didn't know. It felt like only a moment had passed, but also like tens of thousands of years had passed. The terrifying aura that submerged him began to rapidly recede like a tide. His consciousness was restored and he could control his body once more. Qin Yu stormed backwards. This was his body's instinctive reaction in the face of danger. "Humph, humph. I didn't tell you to leave. So what if you run to the ends of the earth?" A cold sneer entered his ears. Qin Yu stiffened. After a brief pause, he bowed. "Qin Yu greets Senior. This walnut was willingly given to me by Lu Xiao. I ask Senior to examine it." Standing on the side, Lu Xiao was glared at. She had an embarrassed look on her face. She thought that she had no other choice. But from the looks of it, Teacher seemed to be a little interested in this Qin Yu. Otherwise, with his status, why would he waste time speaking to her? Could it be that I have another little junior apprentice brother? Thinking of this, Lu Xiao immediately became excited. She didn't even care about the punishment she would face. Little junior apprentice brother. She had been looking forward to meeting such a creature for many, many years. If her dream could come true, what did it matter if she was punished by Teacher? The phantom lightly coughed. He lightly said, "This is a transaction between you and Lu Xiao. I naturally won't interfere." Qin Yu relaxed a little. Then he couldn't help but curl his lips. He thought that no matter how strong or weak one's cultivation was, hypocrisy was an inescapable instinct. With that reaction just now, could it be considered not interfering? Although I don't know why I'm still alive, if it were any other cultivator, I fear they would have already died. Of course, even though he thought this, he still maintained a respectful expression. He bowed and said, "Thank you for Senior's magnanimity." The phantom looked at Qin Yu. "Boy, I can feel a trace of familiarity from you. Perhaps before the 6 paths of samsara, you and I were related in some way. Since we can meet again today, that can be considered a lucky chance. Now, I ask you, are you willing to abandon your other minor Daos and enter my tutelage?" Lu Xiao's eyes widened. She felt a pleasant surprise come too quickly. "I feel a little dizzy, little junior apprentice brother. I really am going to have a little junior apprentice brother. Indeed, I am the smartest person on this mountain. I can predict the future, can't you see? Moreover, it was confirmed by Teacher. This is simply unimaginable, okay?" To those senior apprentice brothers and sisters who said that I was simple, that I didn't have enough brains, I can now confirm that you are all jealous of me. Agree, hurry up and agree. Boy, what are you waiting for? My teacher. Ah, for such a great figure to take you as a disciple of his own initiative. This is simply something that can only happen in a dream. In this sort of situation, you should hurry up and kowtow to him and put this matter into practice. Are you going to wait for teacher to go back on his word and weep for 10,000 years? This shining golden thigh that was as thick as a mountain fell down from the skies, falling right in front of Chinyu. If he said that he didn't want to rush up and hug it, that would be a lie. But the problem now was that just as this thought appeared in his mind, an inexplicable feeling of endless palpitation rose up from the depths of his heart. It was as if he really dared to take this person as his master, his fate would be extremely miserable. But the key was why? This person in front of him, regardless of his cultivation or background, was terrifying, powerful, and overbearing. If he wanted to kill Chinyu, it would be as simple as crushing an ant. Thus, to say that he had deliberately plotted against Chinyu and harbored evil intentions towards him, that was clearly not necessary. Thus, the matter of taking him as a disciple should be true. It was his great luck that a golden thigh had delivered itself to his doorstep. But now he actually didn't dare to agree. It wasn't that Chinyu didn't try. He closed his eyes, clenched his teeth, and directly knelt down and called him teacher. At that time, even if there were any problems, this cheap teacher wouldn't just watch helplessly as he ran into misfortune. With him taking action, no matter how big this world was, what could harm him? But Chin, you couldn't do it. It was as if he really did take him as a disciple, even this cheap teacher wouldn't be able to resist what would happen next. That terrifying aura nearly condensed into essence. Chin Yu was sure that his senses weren't wrong, wanting to cry but having no tears. To describe the current mood swings in Chin Yu's heart was the most appropriate. The phantom furrowed his eyebrows. He didn't think that Chin Yu would remain silent even when he personally asked. Could it be that he already knew, but that wasn't right? That mark clearly hadn't been activated yet. This was a bit strange, but since he had tried to steal it, he naturally had to do his best. There was no reason for him to give up halfway. The phantom glanced at the walnut that Chin Yu subconsciously gripped in his hand. His eyes flashed, and he lightly said, "Perhaps you don't know my name, and I certainly can't tell you before you take me as your master. But as long as you agree to be my disciple, I can give you a trump card that will ensure that no one will be able to move against you in the myriad soul Tao." Temptation. Absolute temptation. This was a formidable abyssal creature. Although it hadn't made a move yet, Chin Yu didn't believe that he would have the chance to wipe away his grudges with a smile. He was afraid that once he was done with what he was doing, he would turn around and think about how he should cut him into pieces. If he had a trump card from a golden thigh, then the situation would certainly be reversed. Chin Yu didn't doubt the might of this trump card. Moreover, since this sort of character had spoken, he would surely do what he said. There wouldn't be the slightest mistake. At that time, the threat of the abyssal creatures would no longer exist, and he would definitely be able to thoroughly investigate the secrets of the myriad soul Tao. And taking 10,000 steps back, if he took such an incomparably fierce teacher, would he still need to spend so much effort to save Ningling? Perhaps as long as he found the peach blossom spring, he could have that woman who planted the peaches sever her relationship with Ling Qin Yu's heart wavered once more. But at this time, there was a buzzing sound deep in his mind, and his consciousness fell into chaos. Chapter 1014. That feeling was like someone had ruthlessly knocked him on the head. Unfortunately, the force was too great, or perhaps his endurance was too low, and he directly fainted. After an unknown period of time, Chin Yu suddenly woke up. He happened to hear an angry roar in his ears. "Just you wait, this matter isn't over." This voice seemed to belong to that inconceivably powerful phantom just now. However, why did it sound like he was feeling a bit guilty? Or perhaps it was something that could be called being tough on the outside but weak on the inside. Chinyu turned his head and looked around. The phantom and Lucio had already vanished from sight. If he hadn't heard that roar just now, he wouldn't have been able to help but wonder if he had fallen for some unknown scheme on the first mountain and was hallucinating. But hallucinating was impossible. It wasn't just because of that roar, but also because Chinyu was currently holding a walnut in his hand. A walnut filled with destructive thunder. It was tyrannical to the extreme, but it seemed harmless on the surface. For the time being, it was called a walnut. This woman, Lucio, had appeared inexplicably, and her actions had left him scratching his head. Her teacher was even stranger. He had suddenly said that he wanted to take Chinyu as a disciple, but in the end had felt dizzy, opened his eyes, and left. Even though Chinyu had personally experienced this, he still couldn't help but feel confused as he thought about it. Just what was going on? If he couldn't figure it out, then he wouldn't think about it for the time being. He was still on the first mountain, and the secrets of the myriad soul path were still waiting to be explored. He didn't have much time to waste on these meaningless thoughts. Chinyu took a deep breath. Of course, the first thing he did was to carefully put away the walnut in his hand. Although this thing couldn't guarantee that he would be able to pass through the myriad soul path unscathed, it was still simple for him to kill someone or save his life at a critical moment. Put it away! Put it away! Chinyu looked up into the distance. Standing on the summit of the first mountain, he could clearly see the appearance of the second mountain. And at this time he had a clear understanding that, after ascending to the summit of the first mountain, he had already passed the test. With just a thought, he could be directly teleported to the foot of the second mountain and begin the test of the second mountain. It was said that climbing a mountain was easy, but descending a mountain was hard. He looked down and saw that the first mountain led downwards. It was clearly much steeper, and he frowned. Even though the road wasn't a road, being a bit steeper was completely meaningless for cultivators. It might very well represent that the amount of penetrative force they had to endure when descending the mountain was greater. The reason Chinyu was able to easily reach the summit was because he had relied on his own strength to cheat. If it were any other cultivator, it would have taken them a tremendous amount of effort to reach the summit. As far as they were concerned, since they could choose to enter the second mountain, they wouldn't waste any more energy on the first mountain. After all, the first mountain was only the first mountain. Only by passing the test of all three mountains would one be qualified to enter the land of inheritance. Right now, every ounce of strength should be cherished and used for sprinting instead of being pointlessly wasted. However, since the path down the mountain existed, there must be a reason for it. Otherwise, when cultivators reached the top, they would be teleported directly to the second mountain. Why would there be a need to place the path down the mountain in front of them? Chinyu thought for a moment and then stepped down the mountain. With the sun-moon force field wrapped around him, the test of the first mountain was meaningless to him. Since that was the case, it would at most delay him a little. Why not try it out? Perhaps there might be some unexpected harvest there. Chinyu had to admit that he wasn't a smart person. Compared to other cultivators, he was just a bit luckier and cautious. Now he could think of things that other cultivators had thought of in all the countless years that the myriad soul Tao had opened. But it was likely that they weren't strong enough to continue descending the mountain path. So they gave up on this choice and directly entered the second mountain. All the way down, reality proved that Chinyu's guess wasn't wrong. The steepness of the mountain path represented the richness of the terrifying aura outside. But it was clear that without Lucio dragging him down, Chinyu was extremely calm. He arrived at the foot of the mountain without any dangers. Just as Chinyu took the final step out of the range of the first mountain and truly descended the mountain, an invisible aura suddenly gathered in the air. Light gradually appeared, and a complex rune appeared in front of Chinyu. With a flash, it fused into his body. Chinyu closed his eyes and sensed it with rapt attention. This rune that fused into his body appeared in his soul space. After a brief flash, it fell into a dormant state. But this didn't prevent Chinyu from figuring out just what this rune represented. Climbing up the mountain, from the moment he stepped onto the summit. He had completed the test of the first mountain. This wasn't wrong, but the road down the mountain was an additional question. He could choose to do it, or he could choose to give up. If he gave up, he wouldn't deduct points. But if he did it correctly, he would receive extra points. But now, Qin Yu didn't know what these extra points meant. In other words, this strange, slumbering rune represented. But this rune shouldn't have any harmful effects. Qin Yu carefully sensed it. After determining that there was nothing wrong with it, he drew back his divine sense. He looked up. What came next was the test of the second mountain. But he didn't know what this test was. Just a moment ago, he had been thinking about this. But in the next moment, Qin Yu's vision blurred. He had entered the range of the second mountain. This change had occurred without warning. But as he thought about it carefully, it was also reasonable. After all, the test of the 3 mountains was a whole and couldn't be divided up. Even if he passed a part of it, he still wouldn't be able to catch his breath. But at this time, Qin Yu wasn't in the mood to think about these things. This was because he already knew the content of the second mountain's test. To be more precise, this test didn't surpass the scope of Qin Yu's previous expectations. This was because it targeted the soul. Because of Shuezheng, Qin Yu already knew about the final inheritance of the myriad soul Tao. That is, the method to divide the soul and condense 10,000 soul seeds. Since one needed to divide the soul to condense a soul seed, there were naturally high requirements for the soul. It was also reasonable for there to be a test of the second mountain. But soon, Qin Yu's complexion subconsciously became strange. This was because he discovered that the sun-moon force field was working once more. That's right, within his soul space, the purple moon and blue sun rose in the east and set in the west. The resulting sun-moon force field paused for a moment, and then the intensity of the vibrations began to change. It was actually able to completely block the strength that was suppressing Qin Yu's soul. This was simply a super awesome, invincible sun-moon force field, an existence comparable to a divine artifact. With the experience of passing through the first mountain, Qin Yu didn't feel any pressure when he looked at the second mountain. As long as he had the sun-moon force field in hand, he could leave whenever he wanted. No matter how fierce someone was, there was nothing they could do to him. This feeling was so good that it could explode. Just as Qin Yu was preparing to rush up the mountain in a single spurt of energy, a cold snort echoed in his ears. Then, with a puff, like a sharp weapon cutting through thick leather, the protection of the sun-moon force field was directly torn apart. Qin Yu immediately felt that omnipresent strength that crazily pressed down on his soul from all directions. Brat, I already turned a blind eye to your actions on the first mountain. Do you really plan on using this method to directly pass the test? With a sneer, the white-robed man appeared in front of Qin Yu. His expression was cold, and his sword-like eyebrows rose up, revealing a bit of anger. Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly bowed. Qin Yu greets Senior. His thoughts raced. Could this white-robed man be the will-born from the myriad soul Tao? According to what the stone pagoda said, the myriad soul Tao itself already had problems. When that abyssal creature obtained approval and directly entered the land of inheritance, this also proved this point. Didn't that mean that this white-robed man in front of him was extremely dangerous? Qin Yu's body tensed, and his heart turned icy cold. His hand moved beneath his sleeves, and a walnut appeared in his palm. Although he didn't want to use this life-saving treasure so easily, he had no other choice if he were to face danger. Humph! Don't think that just because you have a sweet mouth I will be lenient. You can only rely on your own strength to pass the test of the second mountain. Don't think of playing any tricks. The white-robed man sneered again and again, but after speaking he frowned. For a time he looked at Qin Yu in silence, as if he had thought of some difficult problem. After several breaths of time he continued to say, "According to the rules, I broke through your protective force field and violated the rules a bit. So, If you can walk out of the second mountain, then you can obtain an extra harvest. Don't even think about knowing what that harvest is. I won't tell you. After speaking, the white-robed man turned and stepped away, vanishing from sight. Just like when he first appeared, the white-robed man's departure was also silent. Qin, you couldn't lock onto his aura at all. That was it. The dangers he expected didn't appear. It seemed that he was overthinking things, or perhaps the internal problems of the myriad soul Dao hadn't developed to a serious degree. Qin wasn't sure why, but at least for now, the will of the myriad soul Dao didn't have any intention of attacking him. In the end, this was a good thing. Otherwise, if the will of the myriad soul Dao had been contaminated by abyssal creatures, then that would truly be terrifying. As Qin stood within the myriad soul Dao, even if he had a walnut in his hand, he still wouldn't be able to leave this place alive. He took a deep breath and suppressed the tumbling thoughts in his mind. He looked up at the distant mountain peak and began to walk forwards. Without the protection of the sun and moon force field, he had to rely on his own strength to stand within the second mountain. Only then could he truly feel how terrifying this test was. This was different from the penetrating aura of the first mountain. What filled every inch of space within the second mountain was an incomparably powerful oppressive strength that directly targeted the soul. As one stood within, they felt as if they were facing an incomparably massive grinding stone that was slowly turning. And a cultivator's soul was beneath this grinding stone. If they couldn't withstand it, they would gradually crack apart and finally be crushed into powder. The closer he approached the mountain peak, the stronger the crushing strength became. Qin, you could almost hear the sound of the grinding stone turning in his ears. At this time, Qin naturally learned the name of the second mountain's test, the soul grinding stone. As this name appeared in his mind, the world in front of him underwent a massive change. The path within the second mountain had already vanished from sight. What occupied his entire field of vision was an incomparably massive grinding stone that was slowly turning. The so-called slow was only relative to its massive body. In truth, it was extremely fast, rumbling and howling without end. Right now, Qin was beneath this grinding stone, withstanding the incomparably powerful pressure coming from above. He slowly moved towards the center of the grinding stone with great difficulty. Enlightenment spontaneously rose in his heart. This was the soul grinding stone, the true test of a cultivator. Only by withstanding this pressure and walking to the center of the grinding stone could one be considered strong enough. And this sort of powerful soul didn't just refer to the quality of the soul, but also the cultivator's own will. Only by having a similarly powerful will and soul could one obtain the qualifications to obtain the final inheritance of the myriad soul Tao. This was because this was the most basic condition needed to split one's soul and condense 10,000 soul seeds. There was no chance of using any tricks to pass the soul grinding stone of the second mountain. One could only rely on their own strength to force their way through. After understanding this, Qin paused for a moment. Then he lowered his head and walked forwards. Since there were no shortcuts, he might as well walk forwards. Chapter 10:15. Kacha! Kacha! A faint sound echoed in his ears. Beneath the millstone, cracks began to appear on the surface of Qin Yu's body. And in fact, whether it was Qin Yu or the millstone, they were both in a pure soul state. In other words, these cracks were appearing on Qin Yu's soul. This was already an incomparably terrifying injury. If he continued, the cracks would continue to grow deeper and deeper until his soul would finally be torn apart, shattering it and dissipating. But now, Qin Yu didn't seem to feel anything at all, or perhaps he had already sensed it, and yet he didn't stop moving forwards. The sounds of shattering grew louder and louder, gradually emitting a feeling of despair and destruction. From top to bottom, every inch of Qin Yu's exposed flesh and blood was covered in cracks. There were so many that it was impossible to calculate. The pain caused by each crack was 10 times 100 times more terrifying than if a saber were to tear open a person's body. But he still moved forwards, even though the closer he got to the center of the millstone, the stronger the crushing strength became, and his soul was on the verge of collapse. Every time a new crack appeared or their depth increased, it gave one a feeling as if Qin Yu's soul was on the verge of shattering. But every time he withstood it and continued to take the next step. But as he walked on the edge of collapse, there would eventually be a time of destruction. Qin Yu had an intense and clear intuition that he still had 10 more steps. When the 11th step fell, his soul would shatter. Looking up, he saw that the millstone was incomparably vast. Beneath it, he was nothing more than a tiny ant that could be ignored. And the center of the millstone was still far, far away from him. It was so far away that all of his previous efforts and all of the pain he suffered seemed meaningless. Under such a contrast, the impact on one's heart was simply terrifying, and it was sufficient to easily destroy one's willpower. But Qin Yu only calmly glanced at it. His eyes didn't change, and he didn't waste any time. He lowered his head and continued forwards. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 7 steps, 8 steps, 9 steps, 10 step. Qin Yu looked up. He frowned. This was because the center of the millstone was still far away. Compared to when he first saw it, there wasn't any change at all. And this was already the furthest he could go. Another step, and he would surpass his own limits. After taking the 10th step, Qin Yu's perception became increasingly clear. He was sure that if he continued to move forward, he would be completely destroyed. It was still not too late to retreat. Advancing forward meant death. Qin Yu's frown deepened. His eyes darkened, and countless thoughts wildly collided in his mind. His soul instinctively wailed in pain, shouting at him to immediately retreat and not to continue forward. But he was moving forward. There was no doubt about this. Even if it seemed like he hadn't taken even half a step forward, he had truly walked a very, very long way. I refuse to believe that the trial of the second mountain would be so despairing. It doesn't give anyone any hope at all. The more you show me that the center of the millstone is unreachable, the more it shows that I have truly arrived at the end. Perhaps I will die at this step, but there is also a possibility that it will help me reach the end. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and took the 11th step. As his foot fell, the oppressive aura around him reached its peak. He could clearly feel his soul being destroyed in despair. Shattering, tumbling, the fragments of his soul dissipated, and what vanished along with it was his consciousness. In the end, did I still fail? But I am unwilling. If I cannot pass the second mountain, then who else can pass the trial of the 3 mountains? This wasn't arrogance or conceit, but Qin Yu had absolute confidence in his own performance. He had nearly done everything he could, and yet he had still failed. Death was approaching. His consciousness collapsed until there was only a tiny bit left. It was entrusted to the tiny fragments of Qin Yu's soul. But at this time, everything came to a standstill. It was like a finger with infinite power had pressed the pause button for the world. The button. In the next moment, the passing of time began to reverse at an astonishing speed. What was left of Qin Yu's soul rapidly became whole. In an instant, it was restored to its original state. All the cracks and scars vanished. He closed his eyes, feeling that his condition was unprecedentedly good. An incomparably powerful strength surged within his reborn soul. When he opened his eyes, Qin Yu had arrived at the center of the soul millstone. The 11th step was the step of annihilation and also the step of rebirth. But that depended on whether or not one had the courage to take this step. If one was afraid and moved forwards, then even if they had taken the 10th step, all their efforts would have been for naught. They would not have been able to pass the trial of the second mountain, and naturally wouldn't have the qualifications to enter the land of inheritance of the myriad soul Tao. This step was a test of one's character. In his heart, if it weren't for Ningling, Qin Yu might have chosen to retreat when he faced the 11th step. But there were no ifs in this world. Qin Yu had taken this step and passed the trial. Thus, he had obtained the reward he deserved. After passing through the soul millstone, the crushed and dissipated soul was reborn once more. This was a process of destruction and reconstruction. During this process, Qin Yu had obtained many benefits. This was the reward that the myriad soul Tao had given him. But it was clear that this wasn't the only reward. In the air, an invisible strength gathered. Light appeared, turning into a rune. Qin Yu had already experienced this once, so he wasn't too surprised. He swept his eyes over it. This rune was extremely similar to the one he had obtained when he passed the first mountain. But if one looked carefully, they would discover that they were completely different. They were like two directions, one to the south and one to the north. But since they gave off a similar feeling, there must be some sort of connection between these two runes. Shua! The rune flashed and submerged into Qin Yu's body. Without needing to activate it, it arrived in his soul space, right next to the first rune. The two runes overlapped and fused together. Every complex and exquisite rune perfectly fused together without the slightest bit of overlap. After the two runes entered Qin Yu's body, they fell into a dark and deep slumbering state. But after they fused together, they began to emit light and then burn. Qin Yu could feel a faint burning in his soul. But this burning didn't have any evil intentions. After a moment of hesitation, he didn't resist it. Thus, when the rune burned away, a faintly discernible rune mark appeared on the surface of his soul. A voice sounded out in Qin Yu's mind. Yin and Yang runes have combined into one. You have obtained the qualifications to obtain the inheritance and obtain the myriad soul, great Tao. It was deep and heavy, carrying with it an incomparably formidable will that couldn't be resisted. This was the approval of the myriad soul Tao. Qin Yu opened his eyes, a bitter smile on his face. Although he had entered the myriad soul Tao, he had no interest in its inheritance methods. But he had inexplicably obtained its approval. He already knew that by relying on the rune mark in his soul, as long as he wanted to, he could immediately obtain the myriad soul, great Tao, after entering the land of inheritance. This was also what East Zhouchali and the others wanted to obtain after entering the land of inheritance. However, although Qin Yu wasn't interested in the myriad soul great Tao, if he could obtain the inheritance, then he would naturally know all the secrets of the myriad soul Tao. Unraveling it would be much easier. But was the myriad soul great Tao really so simple? What Qin Yu was worried about was that once he obtained the inheritance, unraveling it would be 100 times more difficult. The white-robed will of the myriad soul Tao didn't show up again. However, his voice rang out in Qin Yu's ears. Kid, I fulfilled my promise and given you an extra reward. Now, enter the third mountain. This will be your final test. Before Qin Yu could respond, an invisible strength descended. His body twisted, and in the next moment, he entered the range of the third mountain. Qin Yu's heart chilled and his expression dignified. He hadn't felt much that he had cheated to pass the first mountain. But the test of the second mountain allowed Qin Yu to truly understand just how terrifying the so-called test of the 3 mountains was. Now, this was the final mountain. According to common sense, the difficulty of this test was likely to be even greater than the previous ones. But in reality, nothing happened. Qin Yu walked from the foot of the mountain to the summit. The entire process was incomparably smooth and nothing happened. The moment he reached the summit, strong winds stirred up, blowing away the fog that shrouded the mountain. In the void, a golden door appeared. It seemed to shine with endless light, dazzling to the extreme. But now that he was so close, Qin Yu could see the massive number of holes and cuts on its surface. It seemed as if this stone door had withstood an astonishingly powerful attack a long time ago. At this time, facing Qin Yu, the stone door slowly opened. Rumble, rumble. Thunder roared above his head, and trillions of arcs of lightning wreaked havoc. Within the land of the 3 mountains, whether they were inside or outside, All the cultivators gathered here felt their hearts shake. They looked up and saw that golden door opening in the distance. Someone has passed the test of the 3 mountains. He actually succeeded. How is this possible? I just approached the summit of the first mountain. Just who was it that was able to accomplish this? Cries of alarm rang out. Countless cultivators widened their eyes, their faces filled with shock. Because of some restriction, the contents of the test of the 3 mountains couldn't be transmitted to the outside world. But over the countless years, there had been many cultivators who had passed the test of the 3 mountains. But the fastest amongst them had taken at least 10 days. And now it had only been a little over 2 days since the opening of the Myriad Soul Tao. The golden door was on the distant horizon. But when everyone looked down, they could clearly see the noble posture it presented. So, after Qin paused for a brief moment, he stepped towards the door. Then his blurry figure became clear. At this moment, countless cultivators could clearly see Qin appearance. It's him. Outside the first mountain, several cultivators cried out in alarm. After a moment of shock, their faces flushed red with shame. Before, when Qin entered the mountain, they had been standing not too far away and had mocked him. When they didn't see Qin come out, they had sighed inwardly. They thought that this boy had some skills. But no matter how they thought about it, they never imagined that Qin had already passed the test of the 3 mountains. It wasn't 2 days, it was 1 day, it was 1 day. One of the cultivators whispered. His body shivered, endless awe in his eyes. As the several people beside him heard this, they stiffened. Then their faces filled with shock. Passing the test of the 3 mountains in 1 day, if they didn't see it with their own eyes, who would believe it? Just who was this person? Qin, he's Qin. So it's him. In the past, I didn't believe the rumors, but now I no longer doubt them. Qin background must be amazing. Perhaps he really does have a teacher with a transcendent cultivation. This Qin is actually so terrifying. Halfway up the first mountain, Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping looked at each other with stunned expressions. They could see the shock and bitterness in each other's hearts. So, the person who had been with them before was actually such an incomparably powerful existence. No wonder Eastern Zhili trusted him so much and didn't hesitate to let him guard the first round platform and gather the strength of the 5 of them to seize the other round platforms. How laughable. Before this, they had actually been a bit unconvinced. Xia Chun bitterly smiled. Luckily, we didn't show any hostility towards Qin before. Otherwise, we would have been in deep trouble. Taoist priestess Taiping nodded. I'm a bit moved by Shang Lingyue's good luck. If he hadn't decisively given up, he would have died a miserable death. That's not necessarily true. If that Shang Lingyue was able to obtain the approval of the Myriad Soul Path and be accepted into the land of inheritance, then he must have hidden himself deeply. Xia Chun shook his head, but when he looked towards the mountain's summit, his eyes brightened. These 2 people are strong, but even if they enter the land of inheritance, they might not be able to obtain the final inheritance of the Myriad Soul Path. Taoist Taiping smiled. That's right. It's still unknown just who will be the greatest winner this time. The 2 of them continued to climb the mountain. An invisible strength lingered around them, blocking out most of the corrosive strength of the first mountain. In this world, there would always be more than one person who was diligent, lucky, or prepared. Until the very end, who could determine everything? Chapter 1016. As he stepped through the golden doors, Qin had made countless assumptions, but he never imagined that the so-called land of inheritance was actually a city. That's right, it was an ordinary city that was filled with the aura of life. It was like a small city that could be found anywhere on the plains. It wasn't an exaggeration to call it a small city, because the city in front of him was only 4 or 5 miles wide. The low walls were made from dirt mixed with wheat straw. Perhaps when it was first built, some sticky substance similar to glutinous rice juice had been added. Even so, after countless years of being battered by wind, sun, and rain, it was already riddled with scars. Most of the city walls only retained half their original height, and some were even lower. Occasionally, there would be sections that were severely damaged by natural disasters, or perhaps materials were skimped on during construction, and all that was left over was a bare section of the city wall. Standing outside the low city gate that also looked like a mud building, one could clearly see the smoke rising from kitchen chimneys in the city, accompanied by the fragrance of food. Rumble, rumble. Qin Yu's stomach rumbled. He lifted a hand and rubbed it. A strange expression crossed his face. He didn't know how many years it had been, but as he smelled this fragrance, he actually felt hungry once more. It had to be said that this was an incredible matter, but soon he stopped rubbing his stomach. With a strange look on his face, he reached into his bosom and touched a hard object. It was a big, shiny gold coin. It was the type that was round on the outside and square on the inside. It was the size of a thumb, but there was no rust on its surface. Rather, it shined with a dazzling gold. As he received this gold coin, the strange expression on Qin Yu's face became even thicker. Thinking for a moment, he put away the coin and stepped into the city. As soon as he stepped through the city gates, there was a sudden hubbub of activity. All sorts of stalls were set up on both sides of the street. The merchants that opened their doors to do business, perhaps because they wanted to compete with each other for business, had arranged for workers to stand at the entrance and shout out loud in an attempt to attract the attention of customers. "They're here! They're here! Hurry up and take a look! Our store has just bought a new batch of silk. The quality is absolutely top class. A man will look elegant wearing it, and a woman will look as beautiful as a fairy. You absolutely cannot miss out on it." Those people are just bragging. In terms of quality, our 100-year-old silk shop is absolutely honest, and the quality is top class. They are all talking nonsense. Our Kunlun Silk Manor is a famous family that has been passed down for more than 10 generations. We naturally have a special weaving, secret technique. Our silk can be preserved for 100 years without fading. It is absolutely your best choice. Obviously, these 3 silk shops were slandering and belittling each other. Qin Yu's lips twitched. He had a nagging feeling that he had taken the wrong script. This is the land of inheritance. He gathered his thoughts and continued forward. The streets were filled with people. This small city was unexpectedly prosperous. Soon, Qin Yu found some useful information. For example, there were some people who did not fit in with the city and were obviously outsiders at first glance. A purple-robed man stood in front of a steamed bun stall, his expression uncertain. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and took out a large coin from his chest. "Give me a steamed bun." Qin, you could clearly see that the coin this person took out was exactly the same as the one in his hand. The only difference was that the color was different. It wasn't gold, but a kind of rusty bronze. "Very well, dear customer. 1 coin for a steamed bun. Please take it." A smiling stall owner with a white towel on his head quickly took out a piece of toilet paper. He took out a steamed bun from a steamer and placed it in front of the person. Even though they were separated by a distance, Qin, you could still hear the rumbling sounds coming from this person's stomach. He seemed to be starving. He received the steamed bun and ate it in 2 or 3 bites. Then he closed his eyes. At this moment, Qin Yu suddenly felt 7 or 8 eyes gather on this person's face from all directions. Several breaths of time later, the cultivator who ate the steamed bun opened his eyes. He revealed a look of annoyance and quickly left. As for those eyes that gathered on him, they all looked away. 2 of them lingered on Qin Yu for a moment, but they didn't follow up. As for those eyes that gathered on him, they all withdrew. 2 of them lingered on Qin Yu for a moment, but they didn't follow up. For instance, the cultivators that entered the land of inheritance from the outside would obtain a great deal of money after coming here. For instance, the cultivators that entered the land of inheritance from the outside would obtain a great deal of money after coming here. The only difference was that the colors were different. The worst were copper coins and then a small amount of silver coins. As for the gold coin in Chinyu's chest, he had never seen a second one. This city was the land of inheritance of the myriad soul Tao, and the large amounts of money in the hands of cultivators were the medium through which they obtained the inheritance. Or, it was more accurate to say that through the transactions of large amounts of money, any item purchased contained a kind of inheritance. This was because the land of inheritance of the myriad soul Tao didn't just contain the myriad soul, great Tao. On the contrary, it contained tens of thousands of different inheritances. Some of them were strong, but in the end they were in the minority. Most of them were relatively ordinary, and there were even some that weren't worth mentioning. As for what they could trade for, that depended on the cultivator's own luck and eyesight. In short, it was up to the cultivator to choose what was good or bad. Of course, the appearance of inheritances wasn't set in stone. Rather, they appeared in some sort of random pattern that didn't follow any rules. For instance, the cultivator that bought the steamed bun had obtained an inheritance after eating the steamed bun. His expression didn't seem too good, but if the next cultivator came to buy the steamed bun, there was a chance that they would obtain an extremely fierce inheritance. Moreover, there were two other important points. Within the city, there are two things that one had to buy. One was a place to stay, and the other was food. As for the specific reason, it would be explained later. As Chinyu stood outside a restaurant, he could feel a burning heat in his chest and stomach. His 5 viscera temples that couldn't obtain sacrifices were already going on strike. Rumble, rumble. There was another explosive sound. This sort of hunger seeped into his bones, making him wish he could pick up a stone and chew on it. This was a feeling he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Perhaps it was in the past, before he met Auntie Gu, when he was wandering around the world, that he had felt something similar. Chinyu rubbed his stomach and subconsciously took a deep breath. This wasn't good. The aroma of the food and wine was even thicker. It was like sharp hooks that drilled straight into his heart. "Dear customer, are you hungry? Hurry up and come to our restaurant. Our restaurant's dishes are all cooked by our great chef, and the taste is superb. You won't regret it after tasting it." Standing at the entrance of the restaurant, the young servant responsible for attracting customers saw Chinyu, and his eyes brightened. He immediately tried his best to win him over. 1 silver coin, just 1 silver coin, and you can enjoy a delicious meal in our restaurant. It is absolutely worth it. Dear customer, please do not hesitate any longer and hurry up and try it. 1 copper coin for 1 steamed bun. 1 silver coin for a banquet. Then what about 1 gold coin? Chinyu didn't know. He had never seen a large gold coin appear in this city. His intuition told him that it was best not to expose the large gold coin in front of others. Otherwise it was likely to provoke unexpected troubles. But if he didn't use the large gold coin, how would he eat? When a cultivator entered this great city, they would feel hungry. They had to eat in order to survive. Moreover, they even had a place to stay. It was said that in this city at night, if one wasn't in their room, some horrifying things would happen. As for what these things were, Chinyu had never experienced them before. Moreover, he absolutely didn't want to try them. Things seemed to have reached a dead end. If he used the large gold coin, there might be trouble. But if he didn't use it, then eating and living would be a problem. As Chinyu felt the hunger in his stomach increase, and he bitterly smiled, he suddenly heard a shout. Then a figure fluttered down from the 2nd floor and landed in front of him. "Chinyu, you came in." At this time, the one standing in front of him was East Jo Jelly, her face filled with joy. But soon, she seemed to think of something. She restrained her expression and pulled him towards the restaurant. "Follow me." As she walked, she lowered her voice and said, "Don't speak too much." They entered the 2nd floor and arrived at a round table. Several figures stood up, sizing him up. East Jo Jelly smiled. "Everyone, he is my friend. According to the agreement between us, I can bring him to eat with me." A girl in a pink dress across from her nodded. Of course, Miss East Joe has this right. Her eyes fell on Qin Yu's face. But this fellow Taoist seems a bit familiar. These words seemed to be pointing at something. East Zhou Jelly's complexion changed. This friend of mine has never been good at socializing and rarely interacts with the outside world. I think Miss Yin must have made a mistake. As she spoke, she pulled at Qin Yu. Sit down and hurry up and eat. I still have some work to do, so I can't stay here for too long. Qin Yu nodded. He didn't care about the people across from him. He sat down in an empty seat and began to stuff himself with food. Unfortunately, although he soon felt full, he wasn't able to obtain any of the inheritances of the myriad soul Tao. This seemed to be different from the information he had gathered. It seemed that there were still some things he didn't understand. Are you full? East Zhou Jilly glanced over. Seeing Qin Yu nod, she stood up and said, Everyone, we will bid our farewells first. As she spoke, she stood up and left the restaurant with Qin Yu. Yun Feng, who was wearing a pink dress and had a pretty face, frowned slightly as she watched the two of them leave. A thoughtful look appeared in her eyes. How is it? Does fellow Taoist Yun really know this person? Another cultivator asked, arrogance in his eyes. This East Zhou Jelly only comes from a remote land. She was lucky enough to obtain a few silver coins. Otherwise, how could she have the qualifications to eat with us? And what sort of background does the person beside her have? Yunfeng smiled. She said in a soft voice, Perhaps I am overthinking things. She shook her head, suppressing the ripples in her heart. She swept her eyes over the people in front of her. Now that we are all on the same side, let's talk about our recent harvests. After leaving the restaurant and avoiding everyone's line of sight, East Zhou Jilly finally stopped. She turned and looked at Qin Yu with shining eyes. How could you be so fast? As she spoke, she seemed to think of something, or perhaps it was because her words were a bit inappropriate. Her face flushed red and she hurriedly said, What I mean is, how did you enter the land of inheritance so quickly? Qin Yu rubbed his nose. He thought that it would have been better if she hadn't explained it, but now that she said it, it actually made him feel uncomfortable. He coughed and said, My luck was good. I passed the test of the 3 mountains and entered. East Zhou Jilly certainly didn't believe his words. If one could enter the land of inheritance just because they were lucky, then what were you trying to say? Even if Qin Yu didn't say it, she could still guess. He was truly worthy of being the disciple of a ruler. His background was unimaginably deep. There are some things that aren't convenient to say here. Come with me first. East Zhou Jilly swept her eyes around and pulled Qin Yu along. Chapter 1017. A moment later, in a remote courtyard, Dong Zhou Chali pushed open the door and entered. In the courtyard, there was an old man who was doing carpentry. He raised his head and glanced at her. He could not help but frown. Little Chali, he's your friend. We've agreed before that we can't bring people home as we please. East Zhou Jolly hurriedly said, Uncle Nyo, this is a friend of mine. We only spoke a few words. He will leave soon. Uncle Nyo glanced at Qin Yu, nodded noncommittally, and continued to busy himself with his work. East Zhou Jolly glanced at Qin Yu, and the two of them entered a side room. After closing the door, everything quieted down. East Zhou Jolly let out a long breath. Luckily, my luck isn't too bad. Although Uncle Nyo looks serious, he is actually quite easy to talk to. Otherwise, you would never have been able to come in. Qin Yu nodded. His eyes swept around. This was a very small room. There was only a bed, and there wasn't any other space. The space was narrow, and a man and woman were alone. Suddenly, there was an inexplicable smell in the air. Sensing Qin Yu's silence, East Zhou Jolly's heart skipped a beat. She lightly coughed and said, You still don't know what is going on with this city, right? Qin Yu nodded. After entering the city, I spent some time walking around and found some useful information, but it wasn't comprehensive. East Zhou Jolly revealed a look of appreciation. As I thought, with your intelligence, you were able to sense that something was wrong. She paused for a moment, a solemn expression on her face. This city is the land of inheritance of the myriad soul Tao. You should already know this, but there are many rules in this city. For instance, do not try to attack the people in this city. Otherwise, no matter how strong your cultivation is, you will suffer great misfortune. I have seen this with my own eyes, so you absolutely cannot try it. Moreover, you must be careful with the money you have in your hands. Otherwise, once you finish spending it, you will be forcefully transmitted away. Qin Yu nodded in understanding. He asked about why he hadn't obtained any inheritances after eating. That's normal. 1 silver can order a feast that can be eaten by 10 people. But only those who pay can obtain the inheritance. You and I can only fill our stomachs. East Zhou Jilly glanced at him. After a moment of hesitation, she said, Qin Yu, you should be the first cultivator to pass the test of the 3 mountains and enter the land of inheritance. Then, in your hands, she looked at Qin Yu's expression. If it's not convenient for you to say it, you don't have to. Qin Yu said, You want to know about the coin in my hand. He reached into his chest and took out the golden coin. I only have this one. Ah, Dong Zhou Chali gasped, her eyes wide open. Golden money. You actually got the golden money. His face was filled with astonishment. Qin Yu observed her expression. Besides shock and envy, there wasn't much else. He felt a little more at ease. He and East Zhou Chali were old acquaintances. Now that he had entered the myriad soul path, it could be said that he owed her a favor. He did not wish to have a conflict with her over the golden money. Now, it seemed that this woman's temperament was not bad. What do the gold coins represent? East Zhou Chali took a deep breath. She looked deeply at him. 10 copper coins can be exchanged for 1 silver coin, but 100 silver coins can only be exchanged for 1 gold coin. But that is not the important point. The important point is that this gold coin represents the qualifications to obtain the myriad soul, great Tao. She pursed her lips and continued to say, As long as you are willing, you can use this gold coin to complete any transaction in the city, and you will obtain the inheritance of the myriad soul great Tao. Your luck is far too good. After speaking, East Zhou Chali felt that something was wrong. The reason Qin Yu was able to obtain the gold coin was definitely related to him passing the test of the 3 mountains so quickly. It wasn't just luck. So it was like this. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. He suddenly thought back to the runes he obtained from the 1st and 2nd mountains. After they fused together and branded themselves onto his soul, by relying on these runes, he could already obtain the inheritance of the myriad soul, great Tao. Wasn't this gold coin superfluous? As his thoughts raced, he maintained his composure. I thank Miss East Zhou for the reminder. East Zhou Chali barely managed to compose herself. She waved her hand and said, With your intelligence, you should have already realized that this gold coin is unusual. Otherwise, you wouldn't have hesitated so much outside the restaurant. She furrowed her eyebrows. This is a difficult matter. The gold coin cannot be exposed. If others find out about it, they will definitely try to steal it no matter the cost. Qin Yu, since you have obtained the gold coin, there is no need to delay any further. Immediately complete the transaction and obtain the inheritance of the myriad soul great Tao, and then leave. Qin Yu shook his head. I entered the myriad soul Tao for other reasons. I cannot leave right now. East Zhou Chali said, Then what do you plan to do next? I can help you solve the problem of eating. But what about your residence? Renting a room was cheaper than staying in an inn, but it was still a considerable expense. She still had to search for the inheritance, so she couldn't help Qin Yu solve this problem. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. I will think of another way. East Zhou Chali glanced at him. Don't think about spending the night outside. Although I don't know what the dangers are. Everyone who tried to spend the night outside has already disappeared. Although I don't know where they are now, I don't think you will be curious about it. She glanced at the bed behind her. She clenched her teeth and said, "Wait here. I will go out for a moment." She pushed open the door. The door wasn't closed, and Chin-yu could faintly hear the conversation between East Joe-chali and the old man in the courtyard. She begged and begged, but in the end she was rejected. This seemed to touch upon some sort of bottom line of the myriad soul Dao's inheritance. Chin-yu put away the gold coin and walked into the courtyard. "I appreciate Miss East Joe's good intentions, but I will think of another way. Farewell." He turned to leave, but at this time the old woodworker's eyes brightened. "You have the gold coin in your hands." Chin-yu's complexion darkened, and a cold light shined in his eyes. East Joe-chali's face was also shaken. She clearly thought of the terrifying consequences that would follow once news of this matter spread out. Uncle Nyo didn't say anything more. As if he had determined something, he looked Chin-yu up and down several times. Then he curled his lips and said, "Since that's the case, I will make an exception. You can stay here, but you must be in the same bed as that girl Littlely. I don't want to stir up trouble for myself." "Thank you, Uncle Nyo. Thank you, Uncle Nyo." East Joe-chali was overjoyed. After repeatedly thanking him, she hurriedly pulled Chin-yu back to their room, as if she were afraid he would go back on his word. Closing the door, her face lit up with joy. "That's great. The residence problem has been solved, and you can continue to stay here." Chin-yu rubbed his nose, a bit of an obscure expression on his face. East Joe-chali soon thought of something. She blushed and said, "Everything must be done in accordance with your rights and interests. I don't think fellow Taoist Chin would be so inflexible, right? Or do you have ulterior motives towards me?" Chin-yu coughed and waved his hand again and again. He thought that her words were a bit too fierce. Seeing him act like this, East Joe-chali couldn't help but laugh inwardly. At the same time, she couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. It seemed that he really wasn't interested in her at all. Night fell. The bustling and bustling city fell into silence. Uncle Nyo had locked the courtyard doors early. After coughing several times, he returned to his room and turned off the lights. The outside world was pitch black. Sitting in the darkness, Chin-yu and East Joe-chali simultaneously thought of what had happened. That was Uncle Nyo's reminder. To have the two of them share a bed was clearly not to make things difficult for them. In addition, the entire city was dark and there wasn't the slightest sound of movement. There was clearly something strange about this. Chin-yu took a deep breath. It was already difficult enough for East Joe-chali to ask him to stay during the day. Now, he certainly couldn't allow her to speak of her own volition. "Miss East Joe, we should go to bed." These words, although Chin-yu had tried his best to speak calmly and naturally, no matter how he listened to them, he felt that something was wrong. In the darkness, East Joe-chali's face flushed red. Although she spoke in a relaxed manner, this was the first time in her life that something like this had happened. She was anxious in her heart and didn't dare to speak too much. She only lightly nodded. Inside the woman, outside the man. In the pitch-black room, they could hear each other's breathing. They were lying on a bed that couldn't be considered comfortable. Well, this had nothing to do with the bed. After all, with their cultivations, even if they were to sleep in a sea of flames or a mountain of blades, it wouldn't make a difference. This was because everything happened in their hearts. Even if Chin-yu didn't have any other thoughts towards East Joe-chali, whether it was in the past or today, in this situation today, it was inevitable that there would be some fluctuations in his heart. This was human nature. As for East Joe-chali, if she could really become dual cultivation companions with Chin-yu, then while she might appear reserved on the surface, she was actually filled with joy in her heart. Luckily, this awkward situation between the two didn't continue for too long. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Bang, bang, bang. This extremely ordinary knocking sound spread out far and wide in the silence of the night, seeming especially clear. "Coming, coming." It was Uncle Nyo's voice. There was a trace of restlessness in his voice. Then the courtyard door opened, but there was only one set of footsteps. "I'm fine." You must have sensed wrongly. Uncle Neo spoke, clearly trying to explain. But soon, things began to develop into a bad situation. Whew! A cold wind blew in, causing the windows to creak. Although it was still pitch black outside and they couldn't see anything, whether it was Chinyu or East Joe Charlie, both of them froze. They could feel a cold intent emanating from the depths of their hearts. It was as if there was something outside the window that was approaching and peering in. Uncle Neo's voice became dry and dry. There's a little girl living inside. She paid rent to me, and I have already reported this to the city. My lord, what you are doing now is already a violation of the rules. She really lives alone. How could I dare to lie about something like this? My lord, please continue patrolling and don't make things difficult for this old man. Uncle Neo was still the only one speaking, but the more he spoke, the more one couldn't suppress the fear in their hearts. The existence hidden in the darkness clearly didn't believe Uncle Neo's words. It was unknown what he did, but the cold wind blew even stronger. The windows and even the closed doors began to creak. East Joe Charlie bit her lips. She suddenly reached out and hugged Chinyu, trying her best to shrink her entire body into his chest. Don't move and don't speak. The thing outside has already sensed us. This is the only way we can hide from it. Her face flushed red. East Joe Charlie gathered her thoughts. It was unknown what secret technique she used, but her aura soon vanished. But at the same time, her entire body became even hotter. Chinyu felt as if he was hugging a burning flame. This heat certainly didn't bring any trouble to Chinyu. Rather, it made him increasingly feel the curves and curves of the jade body in his arms, as well as the astonishing elasticity. Chapter 1018. Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed the impulse in his heart. In truth, he had a better method. If he released the aura of the sun and moon force field to hide himself, he should be able to hide it from the unknown existences outside. But before he could do anything, East Joe Jolly had already hugged him. If he pushed her away now, that would make her lose face. Moreover, it would give off the impression that he had clearly taken advantage of her, and yet he still wanted to act high and mighty. He had offended her. Chinyu thought to himself. He tried to restrain his perception so that the impact of the woman in his arms would be reduced to the minimum. The chilling wind gradually dissipated and the doors and windows stopped shaking. Uncle Neo's voice sounded out. My lord, look, this old man wasn't lying. There really is only one person inside. If you had forced your way in just now, you would have violated the rules of the city. It's fine, it's fine. This old man certainly understands. My lord, you are doing your duty faithfully and didn't deliberately make things difficult for me. Just pretend this never happened. My lord, please take care. This old man's status is limited and it's not good for me to do anything at night, so I won't send you off. Then the courtyard door closed and there was the sound of a lock being locked. Uncle Neo turned back and walked to the window. He snorted, clearly dissatisfied with the two of them, but he didn't knock on the door. After returning to his room, he soon lost all signs of life. East Joe Jolly blushed and left Chinyu's arms. She took a deep breath and said it should be fine. As she thought, the following days were calm and tranquil. When the first rays of light appeared outside, the city that seemed to have fallen into a deep slumber suddenly became lively once more. There was the sound of Uncle Neo moving around in the courtyard. Chinyu left his bed and cupped his hands together. I have offended you last night. East Joe Jolly shook her head, not saying anything more. This city is incomparably mysterious, and there are many secrets hidden within it that we have never touched upon. No matter what you do next, you must be careful. Chinyu's heart warmed. Miss East Joe is the same. When the two of them walked out, Uncle Neo's expression didn't look too good. When he looked at the two of them, he couldn't help but let out another cold snort. A young man and a young woman, alone in a room, sharing a bed at night. I originally thought that you would do what you were supposed to do, but I didn't expect that you would treat each other with such respect. If that lord from last night had found out, not only would you have been in trouble, but I would have suffered as well. However, although his tone wasn't good, Uncle Nyo didn't say anything. He only impatiently waved his hand and sent the two away. He actually didn't mention the matter of Chinyu being driven away. This was indeed a bit beyond their expectations. After leaving the courtyard, Dongzhou Chali said, "Since he won't chase you away, you can continue to stay here. After all, it's very difficult to find a place to stay in the city." Chinyu thought for a moment and nodded. He didn't try to be pretentious. After all, time was precious, and he didn't want to waste it on finding a place to stay. Unsurprisingly, that abyssal creature was currently in the city, but what exactly was it doing? And there was also last night the hidden patrol in the darkness. Although Chinyu didn't see their appearance, he could feel a trace of dread from the chilling winds. This city was clearly not as simple as what they had seen during the day. The two of them didn't say anything else. After agreeing to return before nightfall, they turned around and left. The reason they entered the inheritance ground was to obtain the myriad soul paths inheritance. Every day they stayed in the city, they would have to spend money on food, drink, and lodging. There was a limit to how much money they had on them. Naturally, none of them could afford to waste time. As Chinyu walked down the street, his eyes constantly swept around. Along the way, he saw many cultivators that had come from the outside world like him. But it was clear that in this strange city, everyone was afraid of each other. Unless they knew each other, even if they saw each other, they would only glance at each other before leaving, without any intention of communicating. Everyone had money in their hands, and every single piece of money in the city represented an opportunity. If they said that they didn't have any sinister thoughts, then they would absolutely be deceiving themselves. It was only because they had misgivings in their hearts that they restrained themselves from making a move. Thus, it was best to stay a bit further away so that they wouldn't be afraid of each other. The city wasn't too large to begin with. Even though Chinyu walked slowly, after 4 hours he had walked through almost every corner of the city. Now he was standing deep in an alley in the southern part of the city, outside a common-looking private school. The reason he knew this was a private school was because, besides the typical black tiles and white walls, as well as the plaque hanging at the entrance, there was also the sound of books being read from within. Chinyu quietly listened for a moment. Seeing that the door to the private school was open, he hesitated for a moment and then walked in. The door wasn't large, but the inside of the private school seemed to contain its own universe. Looking at its size, it wrapped around 4 or 5 surrounding courtyards, all of which had been torn down. In addition to the 2 neat rows of study rooms, there was actually a decent-sized garden. There was a pond built in the garden, and it was unknown where the water came from. Koi carps were swimming in the pond, and they were sparkling in red and gold. It was quite beautiful. Chinyu looked around, his expression casual. Deep in his eyes, he covered up the dark golden light that flashed. Finally, his eyes fell on a teacher in the private school who was currently teaching a class. He wore white robes, and his appearance was light. Every movement he made was filled with a scholarly charm that only a scholar would have. As Chinyu looked at him, the teacher also happened to look at him. When their eyes met, the teacher frowned but didn't say anything. After teaching for some more time and instructing the students to review the material themselves, the teacher pushed open the door and walked in front of Chinyu. He said, "This is a lecture hall, a place for students to study. There is nothing here that you are looking for, and we do not provide trading services. Please leave." Chinyu apologized. He cupped his hands across his chest and turned to leave. But after taking several steps, he turned back. "Mister, I wonder if you are willing to sell the book in your hands." The teacher's eyebrows furrowed even tighter, a trace of dissatisfaction in his eyes. The Book of Sages records the words of sages. How can it be traded? Chinyu smiled and bid his farewells. After leaving the private school, he turned his head and looked behind him. A dark golden light flashed in the depths of his eyes once more. Before night fell, Qin Yu returned to the small courtyard. He waited at the entrance for a moment before seeing East Zhou Jili rush back. Her face was tired, as if she were exhausted. When she smiled at Qin Yu, it was clear that she was forced. Qin Yu asked. East Zhou Jili didn't reply. Seeing this, he changed the subject. After exchanging a few words, the two of them went to bed. It was still a man on the outside and a woman on the inside. But this night, no one came to patrol. Qin Yu secretly let out a sigh of relief. Then he discovered that there was a faint trace of disappointment in his heart. This discovery left him stunned. Then he couldn't help but laugh at himself. As expected, he was just an ordinary man. The night passed without words. The next day, after leaving, everyone went their separate ways. Qin Yu didn't stay. He went straight to the same private school as yesterday. The doors were still open, and when he arrived, several cultivators were leaving. Their complexions weren't too good, as if they had been given the cold shoulder inside. The one who had driven these people out was the one that Qin Yu had seen yesterday. It was the distant and lofty Mr. Let's go, let's go. There really isn't any chance here. They're just a bunch of pitiful things born from the myriad soul Tao. They actually dare to drive us away. Why lower yourself to the level of a bunch of dead things? As the several people spoke, they quickly left. Their eyes swept over Qin Yu before looking away. They were sure that they had already investigated the entire private school and every possible place. Since they hadn't found anything, then this place really didn't have any value. In their eyes, Qin Yu coming here by himself was just a waste of time. Of course, no one knew who he was, so there was no need to remind him. They might as well let this boy run into the cold shoulder. Reality proved that their guesses were correct. Qin Yu had indeed run into the cold shoulder. As the teacher saw him, his eyebrows arched up. When his eyebrows weren't arched, his facial features were plain and unremarkable. But now that he was a bit angry, he actually seemed a bit more heroic. Those two not-so-pretty eyebrows were actually like two small swords that could fly out at any moment. It was a sight that left one's hair standing on end. Why did you come here again? The academy is a pure land, a place where children study. If you want to play around, then go somewhere else. Qin Yu carefully looked at him. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Mister, I came here to study. The teacher coldly snorted. He pointed a finger at the door. Please take a good look. This is a private school for young children. It doesn't teach adults. Put away your thoughts and hurry up and leave. It seemed that he had already been prepared for this trick. Qin Yu smiled. It is said that there is no seniority in learning and that there is no difference in education. Since I sincerely came to study, how could Mr. refuse me? Sophistry is useless. If you don't want to leave, then just stay here and waste your time. The teacher turned and left. Qin Yu rubbed his nose. Indeed, the stories that were written in novels where the protagonist's words were sharp and they were immediately appreciated couldn't be trusted. He took several steps forwards and entered the private school. As the teacher angrily turned his head, Qin Yu reached out his hand and opened his fingers, revealing a golden coin. I wonder if I can go to school with this thing. The teacher's complexion changed. He looked at the golden coin and said in a low voice, Since you have this, why don't you hurry up and leave? Why stay here? Qin Yu said, I have my own reasons. Put it away. I don't want the quiet and tranquil land of this private school to be ruined by you outsiders. He turned and left. Qin Yu put away the golden coin and cupped his hands together. Thank you, mister. As he thought this thing was useful. When Uncle Nio's attitude changed, Qin Yu had already sensed it. Moreover, it seemed that the natives of the city couldn't reveal the matter of the golden coin to outsiders. Otherwise, after a day passed, there wouldn't be any news of the golden coin appearing in the city. It was because of this that Qin Yu dared to take a risk and take it out. It actually worked. A moment later, Qin Yu took out a book and was driven out. According to the teacher's words, it was already impossible for him to stay and study because of his golden money. Chin Yu straightforwardly bid his farewells and left. Even if he were to stay, he couldn't. Otherwise, they would all return empty-handed, and yet he could stay. There had to be some other reason. At this time, it was best not to attract too much attention. As Chin Yu took the book and left the private school, he suddenly felt a chill on his back. His complexion changed, and he turned around, but he didn't discover anything wrong. But that feeling just now, an abyssal life form, there was no mistake, it had to be him. Chin Yu never imagined that after walking for an entire day yesterday without any results, he would actually run into this abyssal life form outside the private school. Or could it be that this abyssal life form had always been paying attention to this place? As he thought, there was definitely something hidden within this private school.